committee, and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. The event is being streamed on YouTube, and members of the public and media are welcome to watch this meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. Now I welcome all of you in Committee Room 1 at Kensington Town Hall and everyone watching YouTube. Before we proceed to the meeting, I would ask members of the committee and all those present to make sure that their mobiles and devices are on silent or switched off. It is appropriate for us to start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. Apologies of absence being received from Councillor Wade. Are there any others to report?
No others.
No questions of interest. Does any member have any interest there? Minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of July. Are there any corrections, or are we happy for those to be signed? And similarly with action factor that goes with it. Before we start, I would just like to put on record that we've been given two major strategies at short notice in this meeting. And I would like agreement from my members, if you so wish, to work with officers to try to get a better means of briefing the committee before we have the strategies come as a paper for us to scrutinise. Because I feel that as much as we'll certainly scrutinise the ones that we've come to us, if we had the opportunity to some further briefing beforehand, when they're in early stages of draft or others, that we could improve what we will now be able to do. So is everybody agreed? So I will work offline with Jackie in the first instance, and we'll report back once we've had a discussion with officers and so on. Okay. And I'd also like to propose that the order agenda is amended. The asset management strategy that we discussed after the finance reports, that's A4 and A5, and asset strategy is A8. Members may have received this afternoon around 2 p.m. The chair of the Resident Association's email, which they may have been able to see and read. And on the other hand, some members may not have been able to see or read our commitments and so on. I think the other thing to say is that we've got a very big agenda tonight. So I would encourage everybody to be very succinct if they can and address the issues concerned rather than going into long polemics. So the first item on the agenda, which will be taken together with item 4 and item 5, will be taken together. So the lead member and officers would like to come to the table, that would be great. The report A4 is going to the leadership team on 15th of July, next week. For that reason, the committee is, in the first instance, will focus on key lines of inquiry and delivering recommendations for that meeting for leadership from us to do that. It may be members are ready more detailed questions in this meeting on plans, but that was dealt with by a working group, which represents all parties. And the committee will decide part of this this evening. So in essence, what we're doing here is trying to put something more detailed technical issues into this budget working group. Of course, once they've been digested there, they'll come back as part of a report to this committee. So it's not taking it away from this, it's enabling time to look in detail. That's something that I wish we won't be able to do this tonight. So, Monica.
Sorry, Chair, could you just clarify? You used the word strategy. There are 3 papers with the word strategy.
Right.
I assume you're talking about the medium-term financial and the asset?
No, this is the asset, and specifically the asset and the cyber.
And
The reason for the, I agree with you, there are 3.
I just wanted to clarify.
You're quite correct. And medium-term financial strategy is a regular paper that we get, the format of which is well known, whereas these other 2 strategies are completely new, not only in content but also in format. So that was, what I'm saying is that the general rule is if we need further briefings, we should get them beforehand rather than have to go and find out more information afterwards. So item 4, if we could go into that. I don't think we need any introduction doing on either paper. So if members would like to pose questions, I think if we could go around first and just decide what the major issues or concerns are, and whether we can formulate those into recommendations for the leadership, that'd be good. If in passing you want to mention some less issues in budget working groups too, I think that would be useful. It would create an input to produce work.
Sure.
So perhaps shall we start at Monica? Would you like to kick off on these?
Certainly. Given that we are talking about this coming back strategically, I think we have discussed that the main overarching concerns are the next way. This report doesn't seem to directly address these sort of policies and recommendations, reference continuing borrowing or possible council tax rises. And so I'd like to see a bit more of that as opposed to the detail of the narration. But when it comes back at some point, that we have a little more information on slippage and how savings will be made, etc. So I do have some very specific questions, but I think they can go to officers directly on the different pages. But overall, and I'm coming to this as new to this year's outturn, it would have been helpful perhaps to have a little more detail on the implications.
I think if you're going to send a question to officers, it'd be very useful if you copy in the budget work. Useful, because it would be very informative and more transparent. So, do you want me to pass on to Peter? Sorry, Monica, is that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure that's what.
So there are just a couple of instances throughout the report whereby redundancies and vacancies remaining unfilled are given as savings. Now, obviously, salary costs are saved. I do wonder if there's an impact on increased stress on the services if we're doing, if fewer people are performing tasks, are we actually hiding increased costs in the ways of working? Of course, we're not paying the salaries, but there are increased costs. So one example would be adding applications. The timetable has changed in order that officers can have more time to process applications and so forth. But then just going towards the end of the report, so at paragraph 28.4, we've got a £1.676 million budget slippage. We also see in there governance delays, commercial negotiations, design works. Those are all within the council's control. It does suggest that there have been mistakes and therefore serious financial impacts as a result. The report simply contains all of that in one paragraph. It might be useful to have a slightly deeper dive into, that's a lot of money on consensus, £6 million. And when we look at the causes that are given, that the council needs to be sort of self-accountable for that. I think those are the two questions that I'll go to pull out. And again, some of the more detailed stuff from each of the paragraphs of the reports, I'll be asking to come back, and I'll email the budget working group.
Great, thank you. I'm going to suggest that we take Alex obviously next, but if we take the three together, and then there might be some better responses from the table. So
I don't have any questions that can't be answered. No.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll go
You'd
then.
like to pop up? Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
No
because
stress.
it's similar to what Monica has said. So it's way better if you get my questions too. It's about borrowing and it's about council tax. So we're taking the two papers together. So I'm just looking at it in a very general sense. We have lost an awful lot of funding. Our reserves are not what they were. How are we going to get through this? So I can't remember. I probably haven't read the papers properly, but I can't remember seeing where it's clear how much we are actually borrowing and how much in interest that is costing us every year. I think it's mainly probably in the new homes programme, and we all agree that it is a good thing to build new social homes. But I wonder, in the current climate, can we justify carrying on borrowing at the same rate? Also, there are shortfalls in 27, 28, 28, 29, etc. And we know that this year we are not going to put the council tax up beyond 5%. But going forward, is that something we are going to have to look at seriously? Because I think those are the two main issues I've got with finances. Okay.
Do you want to go first, Lisa, or shall I? What do you think?
I'm happy to let you.
Oh gosh, okay. So, and if I don't forget someone's question, because actually there's quite a lot of questions in that. I think there's no doubt that we will need to come back, and we will be coming back to address some of these. The answer on council tax is it's a perfectly reasonable question, and we haven't made any decisions. Nothing is off the table. I mean, the bottom line is we, Lisa well knows the Section 151, that we have to set a balanced budget, and that may well include council tax. But I think the focus at the moment is very much on making the savings. Because that has to.
Yeah.
Because it's always very easy to say, oh, we just without wanting to be political, tax more, but we do also have to look, at the money we're spending. Which brings me to the question on borrowing. I think the answer to the question is on page 55. My understanding is that yes, and that we're currently paying out about 6 million more of interest than we're bringing in. And I've already said to Lisa, obviously I'm quite new to this role, that I want to go through Treasury. My ideal was that number would be zero. That we aren't, we are not having to spend anything on interest. And that means, and you've talked about capital project, the latest capital project, and in fact, looking at the capital project, do we need to do all of these things? And if we do need to do them, do we need to do them right now? Because I think, we're in a period of relatively high interest rates, and it's costing us money to do some of these projects. So I think that, I would, if possible, to at least prioritise them, and so we keep that borrowing to absolute minimum and try and get that number down to zero.
Just as on page 55, I can't see where it says how much we are.
You have to take 11.449. It's the difference between 11.499 and 5342. Is that correct?
That's the net revenue cost. The actual level of borrowing is in the annual Treasury Outturn report. That goes to Audit and Transparency Committee and the leadership team next week. But we can share that offline with the committee to hear what the breakdown is.
But what that tells us is we've got more interest going out and coming in.
Yes,
so we're on, and it's a difference of 6 million.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That addressed most of those questions. I've forgotten something.
There was just my question on the slippage. Which
What's it you said?
Yeah, so I think that was paragraph 28.4, which is the Lancaster West capital programme. So as you'll appreciate, you know, that is a very, very big programme and it does span over a number of years. So when we set the budget, we make an estimate of what we will spend. We do keep a close eye on that throughout the year. It's inevitable there will be some slippage, but that scheme is under a lot of scrutiny. Also, what does happen is we don't borrow money until we actually have incurred the costs. So while it's slipped from what we budgeted, we haven't borrowed the money, so we're not incurring borrowing expenses. You'll see throughout the year that we'll bring back the capital programme as part of the quarterly monitoring report, so you can see that again then as well. But we certainly don't incur costs till we don't incur borrowing costs till we've spent the money.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's emotional.
Thank you. Carry on. Mary.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that obviously quite a big I know it's only 1.5%, but for us as a borough, it's quite a significant overspend. And in the context that, you know, if we go forward having to save money, that is quite worrying. And I was worried about two particular aspects. One was the 19% of savings unachieved, because that says to me, in an organisation, people are desperately trying to work out how they can make the budget balance, and they're being over optimistic. And I think a really good case in point is the CD sort of the customer delivery overspend. So that's got 8 items adding up to 2.5 million of overspend in that budget, ranging from around about 80 grand to 619 grand. And it's a range of over optimism, delays, and you know, each one of them has a good reason. But adding up, that's right at the heart of our organisation. You know, the people that I've been looking to be the most disciplined and the most demanding of their own staff. So I just wanted to make that point. And also, maybe as a suggestion, should the leadership team be looking at a larger contingency next year? And I know that makes life even harder. But if you look at how we've spent our contingency, I suspect every year for the past 3 years, and then we've spent another 3.5 million on top of that. That says to me that actually our contingency isn't large enough. And part of that is driven by things completely outside our control. I know that, adult social care, although they've maintained a brilliant budget this year, but also you know, children's, and there's in whopping great packages for people. But it's just a concern, so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Lloyd.
Just a few things, because some of what I was going to ask has already been posed anyway, so I won't delve into that too much. I've been lobbied quite heavily by a number of residents in residents' meetings, senior citizens, about their concerns for the budget going forward. And when people think it's 5% this year, 5% next year, 5% the year after, that's 20% plus. So I've been lobbied quite heavily there, and I know it's featuring at our MPs meetings in wards at the moment. I have posed a separate question that I've put in writing to the chair, so I won't go into that. But the only other thing that I did pick up on page 41, 18.15, was the establishment of the housing company. And I just wondered if there was any more information about that, because I know it's something that's been talked about, but I just wonder if it's actually going ahead in connection with the recent blocks that are being built. And I know that it might be that they are the first ones to feature in it.
It's actually to do with the pension fund, isn't it? Do you want to? And what's that? I would. Yes, just like the other effect. So yes, this is, you may be aware, but I'll go back a little bit just for people who weren't in the meeting previously. So there was a decision made that the pension fund will invest in some accommodation that we could utilise for temporary accommodation. So we can buy properties, and we're going through a process at the moment to buy some properties. And what that means, obviously, is we can then put people into that accommodation, which reduces the pressure on the general fund, because we're paying for those people to do temporary accommodation at the moment. Because of the complexities around the balancing process at the moment, sorry. And what I mean, obviously, is we can then
Thank you.
Okay.
So just to say, because of the complexities around accounting, you have to set up a middle company in the middle. So we are in the process of doing that at the moment, and that will become the vehicle through which we deliver.
And will that include a new build? Is there
No,
about
no,
online?
no,
Okay.
no.
That's
It's just-
completely just for that.
It's just the legal investment thing that we just have to do in order to facilitate these temporary accommodation.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. And Richard.
Thank you, Chair. So I've just got a couple of comments and a couple of questions. Really, I was looking at the adult social care budget, which I'm quite familiar with and have been for a few years, and it's a great budget. Other than this loan that we are now taking a hit on, I mean, it's just a huge amount of money. So I'd just like to understand. I mean, I did ask the department about it, but I just want to understand, how did this happen? How are we going to stop this happening again? And I know that providers are, we have to do what we can to support, but, it's just a huge amount of money. And just a comment on, I think adult social care is really good at balancing their budget, and having been through that process with them, I think there's a lot of really great learnings for other departments who, it is going to be much more challenging for them. I think there's things to be learned from here. I have a kind of technical question as well, having it's my first time on this committee, about the budget working group, and I was just, I guess, wanting to understand how the process and the timing works. So we go through the budget working group, obviously there's going to be some recommendations and comments. How does that feed into the whole budget setting, and can you explain how that works?
It's evolved over the years, but in essence, it aims to provide a coordinated response from the 5 committees, that's this committee, and the 4 select committees, into the budget process by sort of the end of the year. Traditionally, and when it started, I think I said it the first time around under Mary's Jones, we did just have a couple of meetings in November and December. Now that it's got more complex, and particularly during this year of change, we'll be getting pretty to start now, because the amount of change and analysis required. So what will happen is that group will work out its work program and come back with a proposal at our next meeting. So the detail of that, the representation will be the chairs of the select committees, plus the representation from other members we have on this group from other parties. So I think that's enough to say for the moment.
And that's really helpful. I guess I just concerned.
We're coming back to it at the end of the meeting, by the way.
No, I just want to make sure that we've got enough be able to impact this budget, I suppose is what I'm saying.
And certainly Lisa, as you will see in item 3 on A4, it's offered that she will support us taking more detailed matters for her and her team to support. So thank you very much for that. And I think we very much appreciate that on that. That's pretty.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think most of the points have been already raised. Slippages has always been my pet subject, because I mean, ever since I've sat on with the committee, there's always slippages, and they're pretty slippy. That costs a lot of money. The other thing as well, the borrowing is huge. Is there anything within? I couldn't see any project or anywhere where we thought, we feel pretty comfortable that this particular sector, we are pretty safe that we can deliver savings. I clearly get that feeling. And again, I've asked this before, Mary's just mentioned it, what is our buffer? Okay, this year we have no council tax increase, but that's not exactly, what we should be aiming for to fund ourselves. Or do you think, okay, the government doesn't help us? I'm absolutely with you all on that, and we're doing all our best, but we do need to, find out, what projects and where we can make some savings.
Thank you.
So we are, as Councillor Will said, we are doing a review of the capital programme, and we constantly do review the capital programme as part of the quarterly financial monitoring to try and drive down the level of borrowing as much as we possibly can. We do have choices there in the capital programme, so that's around when we bring forward projects. So we're looking at that now. We'll be continuing to look at that as part of the budget setting process as well as in the year. We've also got opportunities there. You're seeing the outturn report. There's reference to Section 106 funding, and there's reference to SIL, which is community infrastructure funding. You can use some of that monies as well for the capital programme, which means we don't need to borrow. So there are different options, but it's about choices and priority. You know, we've come a long way in the last few years. Slippage has reduced quite significantly compared to where we were. So people are very much more aware of financial situation and getting projects right. As I said earlier, we'll never get these projects 100% right. There'll always be some slippage compared to budget, just because of the nature of the works, you know, whether it be they're on site and actually there's a bit of a delay, or they haven't been able to get on site, so that's delayed things. You know, they're just such complex projects when they're in the capital programme. But we've definitely increased the rigour. We've got the capital programme office who are regularly looking at capital schemes as well. So we're doing our best to try and get that as reduced as we can, but to say we don't borrow until we absolutely need to.
If I may, the point I wanted to introduce, there's a question around, is the slippage, so the underperformance or variance in the budget we've had in 25/6 reported in the comparative figures. Normally we try to ask whether departments can bring things back on track. And I remember last year, financial services was off track, overspending earlier in the year, and then towards the end of the year they brought it on track. So the question is whether we now have a situation where the variation from the budget of 25/26 added to the trend going through to 26/27 and be brought back on track by the end of 27. And if we can't, then we've got options of either using very limited reserves or further borrowings. Money's got to come somewhere. And therefore, are we in a prudent and justifiable solution situation with regard to this year, let alone going forward to 27 and 28, which is aspiring to look at soon after this meeting?
So you're referring to the £3.7 million overspend, which is in the revenue budget of the general fund.
Yeah.
So one, we can't borrow because that's revenue expenditure, so we can't borrow to bring that down. We wouldn't want to. We're just about to start, and Lucy and the team are just about to embark on the 21 financial monitoring for the first quarter of this financial year. Again, we will look at that, see where we are with predictions. I mean, we'll be pushing services hard to deliver a balanced budget. So if there are things that are looking like they're at risk, we'll be trying to make sure we can recover them or bring other options forward to try and reduce that as much as we possibly can as we go through the year. So we'll get that one monitoring report back here after the summer break, goes on to leadership team in September as well.
So I think to take the point I made at the beginning of the meeting, the budget working group will need some prior briefings so that we are better informed from Amsterdam, because there's a new committee this year chasing these two reports with a big consequence of the content.
Absolutely.
It's been a bit difficult for us to get up to the point. With Jackie's help, I've got perhaps 2 or 3 recommendations of things, or one recommendation including 2 or 3 things, something like which. I mean, I've got contingency, borrowing, and slippage as the headings I've written down. Does that reflect the main headings, not the exact questions, but the main headings that we would like the leadership team to focus on more in their consideration of these 2 papers when they consider them?
I didn't hear what you said.
Sorry, contingency, borrowing, and slippage.
Depends what you mean by slippage. Do you mean capital programme slippage, or do you mean savings slippage?
Both.
You can mean both, that's fine.
And Sharon, may I ask, do you mean borrowing in itself or the cost of borrowing? Because obviously if borrowing costs us nothing, then
You could do
Well,
when interest rates were 1/3, I can see it.
I think it depends on what rate you can get it at.
Exactly. We can.
It's the cost, but also I always feel about the borrowing, and we've been doing it for some time. We're not paying back the capital sum. You know, we're just paying the
That's
interest,
right.
and that makes me very uneasy.
Yeah.
I don't like it, so I think you have to look at borrowing as up in the round, actually.
Yeah. I think what we're sensing from here to get headlines, if there's get a sense of what people overall likely continue to focus more on next week, when they're considering this, and we'd let Jackie come up with some words to substantiate that. We're not going to do wordsmithing that.
So my words would be what you've said at the committee,
Yeah.
which I will summarise. They won't be my words, they'll be your words, which I'll summarise and send around.
And she'll send them round.
But just to make one point, so we do pay back the borrowing as well. Actually.
We do.
So we do. It's only in the HRA where we're not paying back borrowing.
But I thought when we borrowed, I mean, I'm completely wrong, but when we borrowed for the new homes programme, that we paid the interest, but I've always said, what about the capital amount? Are we paying that back?
So the general fund, we do pay the borrowing back as well. In the HRA, we don't pay the borrowing back. We're just building up the debt in the HRA at the moment.
And then the general fund, we are paying back the capital amount.
Yes,
Minimum
as well as the
capital.
so it's called minimum capital provision, MRP. You will see it in the capital table in the report. There's 3 lines. It's about interest receivable, interest payable, and then there's a line that says minimum revenue provision.
And over what period are we paying it back?
So generally it's over 40 years. I think
It depends on what the asset's for, between 20 and 40 years, basically.
What percent? I mean, is there a minimum? Is there a percentage?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It ranges. We do have a table with it all the time.
Yeah, it's in the treasury report. Okay.
If we have further information put through to put in the word work budget working, that would be.
Yeah,
we can do
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so I think then we'll move to the next paper, which in the order is item A8, Council Asset Strategy 26 to 30. And this seeks signatures view on the proposed council asset strategy. The company launching leasing policies. The asset strategy sets out the council, how the council uses property and state education to fund the councils while protecting frontline services. Building on the interim strategy which was in February 2025. The ECS leasing policy is one of the objectives that was set in 2025 and is now ready for arrangement. The report goes to a pupil addenda to the Virginia. And this scrutiny is an opportunity to split the policy. The lead member of the and do a short introduction.
Very short, and I think you've probably just covered. Essentially, so colleagues will recall, so council last year, an interim strategy that came in up to February last year. And since then, as you can see from the weightiness of this tone, a huge amount has gone on. And I apologise that it's quite so much. It is a first draft. It's not the final draft. This won't come to leadership team until September. So there's opportunities for people to like today to comment and look further. And we recognise it's probably a bit overlong to do with a bit more editing as well. But we wanted to get it out so people have a chance to look at it because it is a very important document. Sets out our strategy for the next 4 years. I think other than thank all the people who've done so much work on this, I think the other obvious thing to say is since we started this work, the financial context in which we're working has, has changed immeasurably. I mean, the financial crisis, as you know, for the council now, it's almost existential. And so I think, we have to put this work in that context as well, in a perhaps a slightly more urgent way than when we first started. I'm not going to say any more. I'm sure you've got questions. But yes, thank you.
Ricky, would you like to start?
Yes, on the
And we can go in 3 again.
Yeah, actually, one thing I should say, just for clarity, is that obviously there's the asset strategy and there's also the BCS policy review, and they are connected but separate.
In effect, one's a very important appendix to the other.
Exactly.
Sorry, Peter.
Thank you for the report. I know it's a bit long. You know, but that's okay. My main concern was about the VCS, because we have from previous meetings, we have quite a few VCS properties which haven't been maintained. So when we will be renewing them, renewing the leases if and when we do it, what are our terms? Are we going to make them responsible? Because obviously that's a cost to the council now, because we have a few assets which need a lot of money spending. So that was my first one. The other thing I also wanted to know is I know we are disposing of quite a few properties, and just your feel on how comparable it is, with the market rates, and are we doing the right thing? And on what basis have you decided that we need to dispose of these properties?
And,
Thank you, Chair. So it's a really good piece of work, and we agree that our buildings in the best possible way for our residents and using them to not cut services as much as we possibly can. I guess I had a question about the adult social care section. This is a pretty hefty agenda here, and I'm worried that there's a lot, and there's 4 big things here. How confident are we that we're going to deliver them? Are we going to deliver them on time? I know what the plans are for Latimer Road. It's very quick timing on that. So maybe if you can just talk a bit about how much confidence you have with the delivery of that. And then, I had another question about the VCS. And, I agree with Pretty about the state of some of these buildings, and leases haven't been reviewed for years and years. And I'm quite familiar with a lot of these buildings. I did have time to read Samir's submission this afternoon, and I've heard about the consultation with the RAs and the TCC. So I'd just like to hear from you how we're going to address those.
It crosses 2 pages.
Yeah.
And what I should say is that since the paper the email was only received this afternoon, that in formal terms it had been noted in the minutes. But obviously any questions you want to raise on a particular subject is fine.
Well, I guess
it's not a submitted paper as such, because that has to be done quite shortly.
But maybe you can answer that about the consultation. And I just think on the VCS, again, this is what I guess many years ago was going projects and made really good progress with this difficult, tricky conversation. Everyone's got to be treated fairly, and no one's got to be kicked out, and we've got to hold their hands and really guide them through this. So I just wanted to sort of say that it's important that.
Sorry, I haven't read the email because I came straight from the Guildhall, so I'm not aware of that email.
I was well aware of the fact that not all members would have been
So I apologise, but I'm happy to listen to any input from that and read it when I get back home tonight. I was going to ask about the landlord tenant responsibilities and condition handover. Is this something that is a big problem for us when we hand over properties or properties handed over? And is it a big cost expenditure? And the other question I had was about the business rates. Is how the big changes that are coming up going to affect us in our revenue budget, because I believe that would be a big impact on what we do.
Okay, so I think that's enough of the group.
That's a lot. Shall I try some? Do you want to start? I think actually what I need probably to say, because I was trying to keep my opening remarks short, is something very specific about the VCS policy. So the reason why we are introducing policy is to be more transparent and fair. Lots of councils have a policy. We've never had a policy as long as I've been here. With conversations have gone round and round about how to have a sensible policy that everybody knows about. We know within the sector there's often, that people are treated inconsistently. Some people pay business rates, some people don't. Some people pay the utilities, some people don't, and that's not great. Because we can't, we don't even know why some of it's just grown up over time. There's in particular, so we need to have a proper fair policy. Everyone is transparent and fair. There is no, this is very much a prospective policy in that it will only apply at the point at which your lease expires. So once it's agreed, we're not going to go around to everyone and say, "Oh, we've changed the policy now. You're out." That's not how it's working. At the point at which people's releases are renewed, we'll then say, "This is our policy." So I hope that answers that part of that question. I have spoken to Sandra already, and I get the point that she's making about HRA properties, where there is also a tenant. I mean, my view is we've still got time, and said this isn't done. So I really have. We'll look at that. We'll take. We've got a meeting booked with you anyway, haven't we?
We are coming.
Can we just get through the questions? Or do you want? Why don't it?
No, if we could get through the questions from the.
Yes, and sorry, John. And then there's also a piece about the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, councillors. I'm just building on Councillor Will's responses. So as we tried to set out in the appendix on the VCS policy, absolutely, we're really clear that some of the conditions of some of our VCS properties are not where we want them to be. Absolutely, all of the structural repairs will always be the council's responsibility, and that's where most of our challenges lie. The policy does point to asking the tenants to take on responsibility for internal repairs, and I think we've heard from you all, but also from some of the community representation, that we need to be really clear, I think, and perhaps clearer on what the accepted standard would be before we expected the tenant to be able to take responsibility for that. And I think we can try and accommodate those processes. But we absolutely recognise that going through this process in the way that Councillor Wells described is not about a shunt of responsibility for having the buildings in an adequate state. That isn't the design of this policy, and that's only what's fell through its application. In terms of the consultation, so absolutely, I think where we've reflected on the VCS policy, particularly we've engaged with existing tenants in our buildings, VCS organisations based in the borough who aren't users of our buildings, residents through the citizens panel, and I think we should have engaged with TCC and RAs, and I think we're definitely happy to accommodate that, and I apologise for the fact that we did not do that. And I think it's entirely appropriate that we should have. In terms of some of the other questions, particularly, so on the disposals point, there are a few pointers in there where we're thinking about considering doing that. If our financial situation was different, I don't think we'd be in that position. But when we reflect on the number of operational buildings we have, the number of commercial buildings we have, and thinking particularly also in the last year, the analysis that we've now done about the cost of those buildings and potential benefit, we are trying to weigh up and make difficult trade-off decisions about how we might be able to sort of balance the books more generally. And that will always be part of it, but there will always be this, every single time when we get down this road, there will be an individual decision. We won't be relying on this policy. We'll do formal consultation and a proper decision that allows all of those balanced viewpoints to be brought forward. In terms of the confidence in delivery, there is a lot of projects here. It's not all of our projects by any means, but there are a lot of large projects here. They exist already. They're already on our business plan. And I think what we're trying to do through this work is really be able to forward plan our responsibilities over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, just to make sure that we're delivering in a way that perhaps we haven't always in the past. Am I absolutely confident that we're going to be able to deliver everything that's in here and the things that I want? Right now, that would be a lie if I said absolutely confident. Do I think we were on the right path in the document house? Yes. And I think what we're going to be trying to do is provide an annual update each year so that we can show you the progress in terms of the implementation that comes with this work. And we haven't covered, I don't think, the business rates question. So in this paper, really what we're talking about is the cost of business rates, like who bears those costs. And as Councillor Will said, we have had a variation in where our tenants are picking up those costs or not. We do think it's important that that is managed fairly and in a consistent way. And But I think where our broader challenge financially is the fact that we're not going to be retaining business rates in the way that we once did, and that's why we have such an enormous gap that we now face that requires some of these things.
Right.
Chairman,
I don't think we've answered all the questions. So just
one
Right,
very regular on the VCS. Have you ever considered if is there a possibility of consolidation? So just throwing it out.
Yeah, I think where we need to be able to look at all of our community related properties is what's the need fundamentally, what do our residents need, what do they require, and what's the most efficient way for us to be able to meet that need. When we look at the utilisation of some of our buildings, some of them are only used 5 to 10 hours a week. Some of them are used every single minute of the day. We need to get to a balanced position where our buildings are utilised as much as possible, whilst also treating the individual parts of our community with the respect and independence that they deserve.
Thank you. So we can move on. Mary, I think you're.
Yeah, I'm to a few points, but I rattle them up and please don't have to ask them, or some are just suggestions, I guess. I just wondered, for such an important strategy, there's no real declaration about our overall policy of disposal versus retention and repurposing. Do we prioritise retention over disposal? And the reason I ask that is I'm a believer in trying to keep us as flexible as possible. There are buildings that we don't need now, but given a huge growth in the child population, we might need again for schools and so on. And I'd really like us to have at the back of our minds flexibility. And I'd like it would be sensible, I think, to have that in the policy if you think that's appropriate. There's quite a lot of jargon in here. I never worked out what portfolio based meant. I did finally work out what locality based meant. That's just a comment. There didn't seem to be very clear criteria for when you decide something's good for residents who's in the community, or it should be an income generating property. And I couldn't quite work out where that line lay. I was concerned about the section on the proceeds of subletting for the property services, community services, because some of the buildings are quite, iconic and very good to let out. And we seem to be assuming that everyone's just going to let it out to other VCSs, but I don't think that's always the case. And should the council have a share of the proceeds, for example? Should we try and be a bit more imaginative of that? And then just finally on the leases and what the obligations are, we have had examples of repairing leases where people haven't looked after things like this, and obviously we really and then you can't, after years and years of letting them get away with it, essentially you can't ask voluntary services then to go and pay for a whole new lift. That's ridiculous. So we want to get out of that situation, but whatever we go for, including just internal maintenance, we need to have a really good inspection and monitoring regime so that people don't fall behind and then voluntary services can't possibly catch up. And so I think that needs to be built into the statute.
Thank you, Mary Chris.
Yes, just looking at that housing section, I thought it doesn't really say here what our policy is, but I thought we had kind of agreed that if it was a kind of single on-street property, we would consider when it becomes void, we would consider selling that, and that we were at the same time trying to buy back on estates. That's my understanding, but it's not really in the report, so that's why.
Sorry, and that's because that policy is in housing, and so that I think where that's come through in the housing and King Select committee discussions.
This is about operational assets.
Absolutely. So this is around the general fund rather than the housing revenue account.
Okay.
Except the VCS covers both, as does the commercial income. Confusing.
Okay.
But what you've said is essentially right. That is the housing intention.
Yeah, so the question I kind of had around the move from maintenance to bringing it kind of in-house for tenants, I wondered, on top of the kind of question Mary raised about how that's going to be monitored, is the council planning on providing any sort of advice or preferred providers? We know that with a lot of the major works and repairs, often there are complaints about some of the companies that come in and do those works. but also with it, I'm just considering lots of kind of voluntary organisations might not have the capacity even to, aside from the means, just kind of the capacity to do that in a kind of focused way. So I wondered if there had been any thought given by the group into how we might be able to help our voluntary community organisations secure best value for money and avoid kind of being ripped off.
I think that's a very good question. So how do you?
I think there's three main questions. There's something about subletting, something about policy, and about the maintenance, monitoring of the works and supporting sector. And we do have a policy actually on disposal. We'll let Christine talk about that, and perhaps the piece about maintaining the properties and keeping on top of that work and monitoring it.
Right. So yes. So last year when we did the initial strategy, we did include within it a draft disposal and acquisitions policy, and I think that was the circumstances where we would consider disposal or where we would, and then the criteria essentially if we disposal or acquisition. I think what we'll then do with this, and that's something that's useful that was flagged. Because over the summer, I think what we should do is establish that in the document when it goes to leadership team in the autumn, and I think we need to be broader in exactly the way that you said, Councillor, whereby we're thinking ahead. It's meant to be a long-term strategy, so we don't. We have to look at whether we can afford to retain some high burden assets that we don't actually need for operational purposes, but actually we need to be looking ahead at what our longer term needs would be. And one of the areas where that work has been done has been in the adult care area around learning disability, and that's why we've made decisions either on acquisition or on reuse of properties that might otherwise be sold. So every time we're looking at the properties that we might dispose, we would be taking that into account. But I think we have to recognise, as Callum said in his response, we're under more pressure now to not hold assets and not hold the holding costs associated with assets that we have no use for. So the policy is more likely to be allowing it to happen in circumstances, but we need to take on board that long term. So it was quite a long answer, but it was actually quite an important question, and one that I think is right that we should flesh out further to make sure we picked up that point.
But I think we should pick up what we said in the interim in this report, and I don't think we have what we've done. I think it's a really good observation. We haven't reiterated it here. And you're right, we want to be as flexible as possible because we don't know what will happen in the future. And then there was something about monitoring of works on these properties, works on maintenance properties.
Yeah, and I think I think what we've essentially got, we've got commercial properties, we've got operational properties, and voluntary community sector properties, and all of them will have a degree of landlord-tenant relationships where we'd be really clear in the leases. And I think it's a really good point raised, and one that I think we should take away and make sure that we have fleshed out, because there are some responsibilities that just cannot happen anywhere other than on site. So your on-site health and safety, etc. I think that has been an issue in the past, because if that has been coming back to the council, but we can't do that. So I think having real clarity about exactly responsibility and looking at where those gaps might be. I think the issue we've got is if we've got properties that are in poor condition and under-maintained, that's where I think we start looking at the localities and the hubs, and actually are we able to consolidate? I couldn't it was said it earlier about potential. Thank you. But that's where we may need to look at that, because actually the long term of maintaining a large number of poor condition, inadequate properties for whoever is using them, at the end of the day, they're providing services to residents, whether it's council services in there or whether it's voluntary community sector and valued services and using those properties. We need to make sure that the buildings are fit for purpose. So in any arrangement, in any lease agreement with the voluntary and community sector organisation, the council would always still retain structural responsibilities, major works responsibilities, and the tenant responsibilities should be more straightforward. But I do think it's something that we would need to flesh out on each agreement to make sure that we've got that right and we've got the balance of burden and responsibility correct.
And yes, like, I just was just sort of focus a little bit, sort of following on from some of these questions, and specifically on the housing work stream. So it wasn't clear to me whether regarding disposal of assets, that will be within the strategic objective, whether there will be a target of retaining kind of net overall the same housing provision. So if we were disposing of assets, making sure that that was made up elsewhere. And yeah, I mean, we were looking at these assets. We've got a very helpful table on what the running costs are for the sort of 15 most expensive assets. That table doesn't translate into kind of disposal targets. So I mean, we're sort of coyly dancing around the point of here is actually which of these assets we were looking at. I think that's probably why we received an email today about that. And then finally, impact assessments, particularly in the monitoring community sector. Do we have a view of what the impact of them is, and actually what the impact of us is on the disposal process? It might be that this actually costs, the savings are less than anticipated. We mentioned some of the conditions of the property. So those are my three questions.
Yes, maybe I can add because we're looking at similar things. The VCS, I'll come to in a minute, but in coming this as back to this kind of reporting, I very much pick up what Mary said, that I think I have asked Jackie for a whole glossary of terms and backgrounds, and so not just looking at Walton Road as a locally model approach. I think we have to get back to some. For this to be strategic, we have to be able to understand what that means and target operating models. So for me, it was difficult to read this as a strategy as opposed to a draft towards what the issues are, because I didn't see a criteria for actually understanding the basis of prioritization. Why certain, I think it's a bit too soon to actually start looking at addresses and locations without a strategic outline of what are the criteria for disposal versus retention and upgrade. And that's what we need to be able to understand these lists. And I didn't see anything around social value. And social value can be actually given a financial piece. And so let's say somewhere in North Kensington, like the Walton Road Hub, which closes at 5, but could be open until midnight or all night doing some things, where do you put the values? So I found it was very much a finances document, property and finance. So I'd like to see it being edited down and looked at again around actually outlining criteria, which is not just financial, because once you lose the property, you can never buy anything back. That's how it is. So I would say the criteria is how can it be made more productive? And so there was that. I have a small question, but I'll raise it here and then you can answer through answering Jack if you will. But I'm a bit worried coming back to about the citizens panel legitimacy. I've been asking questions about this for some time, like who are they now? Where are they? What are their postcodes? Where do they live? Etc. It's being used now as a sort of general term, perhaps for residents. So I think we've got to, this whole document is going to be so sensitive that we've got to be a bit careful about what we mean there. And so I'm very much, I did just catch before the meeting the very helpful emails, I think, and questions from Samia and others. And I think we might lose something if housing within this strategy is just held in housing, and that this is where this overview can bring it maybe not in the detail of the exact location of the estate, but in the criteria. And that worried me very much. So I would like to see that before September, those kind of criteria of prioritisation are raised, are actually there at the beginning of the document, and some of the consultation with TCC tenants and wider is there. The second question, that wasn't much a question as a wish, on the VCS leases, what I'd like to see in the September report is that you need at the beginning of that document, or I would like you to detail the key differences and changes. So you're outlining a new approach, but certainly coming to this new, and even if we had a lease in one building, we wouldn't necessarily know what the lease in another building is. So I think we do need to know what are the main changes from the current situation. And I'd also like to know what are the impacts that you anticipate on VCS core funding if they are working from lease to lease, and if there is that insecurity, which there is at the moment. And it might help us address it. So that's a side thing, but I know this is going to raise a lot of insecurity. And there are, I believe, I've already become aware of 2 unsigned leases, memorandums. So I think somewhere in that document needs to be around timeframes and assurances about signed leases, and not keeping that insecurity. But so I'll save other things for hopefully when we can look at this again in September with a glossary next to us.
Well, lots of helpful observations and comments, and thank you. I think we'll take lots of those on board. I'm sorry, now I've got this, I can't read my own handwriting, having made notes for all the questions you asked. Should maybe tell that. Why do you have a phone? I'm trying, sorry, to decipher my handwriting.
So, to Councillor Marshall's questions, so just to confirm, this policy doesn't look at the individual properties that people live in terms of housing. So it's silent on any housing disposals, and that is intentional. But I think it should be clearer about where the lines start and what this policy does cover and what it doesn't, because clearly it's not clear enough. So we can adjust that. In terms of disposals more generally, which understandably has been the source of a lot of the questions tonight, the paper isn't necessarily right now saying we are going to dispose of this building or that. We are further down the road in thinking through certain decisions than we are others. But so what it's trying to articulate is a position that starts to reflect on the reality that we might have to look at some of these decisions. But absolutely, every single disposal that we actually get to will be consulted on, will have an impact decision, and will reflect on the balance that I hear what you're saying. This paper is really looking at the financial and property implications rather than its broadest point. And it has to be able to do that. And that is our assurance. So we can make sure, again, that's clear in the document going forward. In terms of the edits and information documents, absolutely. In terms of the citizens panel point, so we will include the engagement with RAs and the TCC. In terms of what the citizens panel is, so it is a group of 1,000 residents that are appointed by an external company that reflect the makeup of our borough. So they spread borough-wide and our demographic representation. And essentially, then at different points, we engage with the citizens panel to come along to events or to reflect on particular feedback. And so it's a way that lots of councils use to supplement, never instead of, but to supplement consultation with a demographic sample of our borough, rather than just an open consultation which people can choose to come to or not. So that's how it's used more generally, but absolutely we should have been broader in this process.
Could I just ask one prologue for that, do you mind? Yes, I understand citizens panels, but we're starting to use it, and in the other documents, as a key indicator of completion, like in the Grenfell, or success. So it would be useful to know perhaps postcodes, and again,
Yeah.
if it is a choice for people to come to citizens panels, if you have people who choose because it's near the town hall and they live in West 8 or West 2, but they don't live in West 10, I would say you'll get a different weighting. So I just think that is something that we need to look at when we're using the word residents. We need to start breaking down.
Of course, and we can provide, we've got a report, at least from last year, I don't know if we've done this year, latest year's ones yet, that looks at the engagement levels of everyone who's on the citizens panel, how demographically reflective they were. And, you know, while we do think it's a useful tool to be able to reflect with residents in that particular way, it should never be a singular way that we engage with them.
Thank you. Chair, sorry, may I just add something? So on your question about criteria, actually set that out in the interim document we did last year, and again, and this, you know, this is why this is helpful for us. We need to refer to that. I think it's probably also worth saying that the whole time I've been a councillor, I've never been very keen on disposing property because, as you say, once it's gone, it's gone. But I think we have to recognise, given our financial, you know, fair funding, that we will have to probably dispose of some properties. We need each one of those will be carefully considered. There'll be a separate process around it. And I think for me, as much as the cost, you know, maintaining, you've alluded to that. And in fact, there are two property. There is a property mentioned on table 1, which is at Marks, which is one of the more expensive. You know, those 15 we talked about. So you said something, there's been emails and dancing around. I didn't know what that referred to be honest. So perhaps you've seen something I haven't. But you know, obviously that it comes into the criteria, the cost of maintaining the property or what's there needs to be. Sorry, that's for me.
I just wanted to ask one question before we move on to asking people from public in. The question I want to ask is that in the mapping exercise that's looked at in this paper, which recognises the partnership between different parts of the council, NHS and BCS and all those things. Two of the major parts of the council, ASC and Family Children's Services, are now managed on one team across 2 borough offices. So have you decided whether to do the mapping on a sovereign RBKC basis or on a combined RBKC and Westminster basis? Because it could make a significant difference. And very rough cut, if you had a north, middle and south hub for a particular comport of services, for instance, housing, families, whatever, you might end up with 3 for Kensington Chelsea, 3 for Westminster, but actually a footfall distance to get to a service analysis might mean that you could do with 5 across 2 boroughs. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages of both approaches, but I think the leadership team needs to face up to the decision as to whether the analysis is going to be a sovereign analysis or whether it will be a 5 across 2 boroughs.
Yeah.
So if I could now move on to the 3 hands up. Emma.
Thank you, yes, Chair. I emailed you, but I think you missed it, just to give advance warning. But there are 2 properties which neither have budget streams, as far as I remember, for this year, and neither do they come up in any of these, both council assets, community assets. One of them being base 17 to 19 Maxilla Walk, and the other one being Lancaster Youth Hub, Lancaster Road. So they don't appear anywhere here. So I don't understand what the plans are. And I don't think either of them had any kind of budget line. So I'm a bit confused and worried about their future.
Yeah, not every property is in here, and I think the reason they're not in here is there's no changes. There are no changes planned around those properties, so
nothing's happening then.
But by the way, if you can't you are asked a question that you don't know the answer to, it's perfectly able to come back.
So
Fine.
the Lancaster Youth Hub sits within our,
So, hold on a minute, we have one conversation.
the Lancaster Youth Hub sits within our commission services portfolio, because it's where one of our youth services are running from, so it sits within that.
I understand.
And Bay 17 to 19 sits within our community spaces. I agree with you, they're not referenced as named properties where others are, but there's no particular reason for that. And I think that if I reflect on our council plan and the positioning that we place, particularly Bay 17 to 19 on, that's an omission that should be included.
That's what's
It's an omission
An
and it
omission.
should be included. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
So,
We could put every single one. This is a draft, so we can put it in the next step.
Please, that would be helpful. And you know, the longer term for the Manchester Youth Hub, because no, I do know how it's being used at the moment, but longer term, it needs repairs as so on as all these other properties do.
Yeah.
So I just think it
No,
would be
that's
helpful.
fine. We'll make sure they're both put into the final.
Okay, thank you.
if we could move to my right, to your lady.
Hi, my name's Mimi and I live on the World's End estate. My statement is really, it's just a statement, it's not so much a question, but something for you guys to sort of bear in mind. Thank you, first of all, for those of you that were able to read the email that Samir sent. Unfortunately, the time frames that we have been given to review any document, to give any proper answers or challenges have been so tight that it's almost like, you know, you guys are just galloping along without us. And I think, so thank you for that. In regards to this item, coming from Wales End Estate, an estate that was designed to reflect a village-like environment, we have traditionally been under-invested in, and the place is falling apart. The other concern is that because the budget for voluntary sector is being cut, we have services in Wales End that are at risk right now. And the fact that you're talking about properties and cutbacks, and I'm looking at the residents, I'm looking at the provision, and I don't think that you got that leadership or members of the committee, officers, are actually looking at what you pointed out, which is the value to the local community. The south of the borough is practically barren where community provision is. You know, it just is, and constantly struggling for everything all the time. So I would ask that within your bubble, you find some space to think about the impact of keeping, of withdrawal, and actually the long-term cost that it would cause should there be further underinvestment. We've got the under fives, we've got the big logo, we've got things going on in Chelsea Theatre, but all of them are completely struggling. And as a community that hasn't got a lot, I think we should have a little bit of thought around what we south of the borough may deserve, in inverted commas.
Helen, do you want to call?
I'm just going to say thank you for that. I live in the south of the borough and I know the estate, and I agree. I think sometimes it has been overlooked. So I take on board those comments and just reiterate, I'm not sure if you were in the room. I appreciate what you're saying about Sammy's email. We've spoken to Sammy, that you feel that you won't get enough time. We've acknowledged, you know, we probably should have spoken to the HR, and that's sweet. But the good news is there's plenty of time, and we're already going through the group. We're going to have a meeting with Samia because this isn't the final draft. This is the first draft. We just wanted to get it out before the summer. So we will, you know, we'll definitely come and talk to the TAs of whether relevant properties.
Sammy.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarification in terms of what we submitted today. Obviously, that was 2 p.m. as you rightly commented. We're not asking you to debate this tonight. And I think when you talk about notice, your constitution requires 5 working days under part 16.02. But that's for officers' reports. So what we've submitted is not a new item. It's a comment on reports and on agenda items for which you had ample notice. So really what we're asking you tonight is to put this on record, including that letter dated 21st of June about the refusal from the Director of Housing Management to go along with residents on their estate. It's quite significant because 14 residents associations chairs or compacts have co-signed that letter. That's at least half of your stocks across the board. So that's at least half of your stock. And when we are at a pivotal time, when we are understanding what Grenfell has taught us and we are embarking on the review of culture, we can't start with ignoring the majority of people living on your estate. So all I'm asking this evening is that you as the chair agree or make a recommendation to your members to agree to formally record the representations we've made, the letter that we submitted as well, and also the recognition that we are going to be working with Joe's team and the properties team in terms of really, we've got only one ambition, and we hope you have the same ambitions, not to engage with the residents, but to partner with the residents. And those two items are going to give us the opportunity to do that. And I hear, yes, there's criticism of residents' associations, and I'm the first one to say that TCC has not always been perfect. We are at a time where we have great members of the TCC who are committed, who are skilled, and who are going to co-create a new governance with you and create the legacy for Grenfell. So I'd like this to be recorded, and a commitment from this committee to support this type of partnership between the RS, the TCCs, and the relevant RBKC department. And if it can't be recorded, I think in the minutes you can record the letters, or there's something within. I'm sure Jack can look into that.
I'm really sorry. I think there's been more than one letter, and I'm getting very confused here. I was referring to the letter that you sent a few days ago. It doesn't spend a lot.
Yeah. So
are you talking about the VCS?
No.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Can we?
Yeah, sorry.
I think this needs to be divided into two parts. The first part of the summit has been we note the email, and we also record the fact that you're going to be having a conversation or a meeting, or however you want to describe it, outside this meeting afterwards.
About VCS.
Yeah. No, I think that what I'm coming around to say is that the rest of this discussion, we haven't got time this evening for a long discussion between the two. It would be much more fruitful if you actually had that discussion between the two of you outside this meeting. If it then needs to be referred back to this meeting at a later date, so be it. But I think that the point here is that we've noted the email, which you'll see very late in the day today, and reflecting what you have said reflects also my worry, like I said at the beginning of this meeting, is that we're under too much pressure in this committee, and you feel under the same pressure about not having time to talk through things prior to formal steps. And I totally agree that. So we've already agreed as a committee that I will be working with officers to try to find a better way of handling some of these combination of strategic and detail issues, because we have time for reflecting on the strategic, but the detail needs to be taken budget working group or meetings you have with yourself. So I don't.
So long as those recommendations are somehow recorded within the records of this work of the committee. Because we're not asking the debate.
We will note the email in the minutes, and we will reflect the fact that you and Emma have agreed to be working further outside this committee, and those things will be on this committee's record. Okay?
Yeah. To be fair to Emma, there's two submissions. One was on this agenda item, and one was confused. So we just killed two birds with one stone. But I just wanted to reflect that both teams have committed to work with TCC members. So I think it needs to be recorded as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for you'll give us another. I'm shooting up in 30 seconds, so I won't keep the conversation right now. I just wanted to kind of raise some of the challenges, the past challenges, where when we're talking about mismanagement of assets and leases, this speaks to a culture of leadership which has failed the same people, the same organisations, the same residents. And if we think about Grenfell as the worst case failure of asset management and land governance. And so I guess putting a focus on through the lens of Grenfell legacy and the spaces that we're talking about. For example, Langston Youth Hub On record, there's been discussions around the disposal of mixed use hub over the last few months, which would be good to get some clarity. I won't be here to hear your response today, but also when it comes to Maxilla City, that's also been, you know, kind of thrown around left, right, and centre, and a lot of people will know some of that history in that context. So I'm questioning. I don't want to get into the ins and outs of all the projects, the assets, the spaces, but I'm questioning the culture, the leadership team, which is continually doing the same things, the same organisations, especially in a post-Grenfell landscape. So I've got to go and get my son now. So.
Right. If I could add, I would suggest one encompassing request that in the light of the way this paper's come to this meeting and the fact that it's going to go through another draft anyway, the timings of the meetings of OSC and leadership in September are such, we can certainly scrutinise the paper, but we won't be able to have any further input to it as it'll come too late in formal terms. So the way to achieve that would be for us as a committee to have sight of the paper when it's in second draft, or it is presented formally as a paper, so that we can make further comments and reflect the items that have been raised, but also reflect the items that have been raised by the community representatives. So that's my request or recommendation. And we agreed that that's what we'd like to do that. Right, thank you.
And would it be helpful, Chair? I'm conscious that there are some questions you raised sub-meeting, we talked about SC, if people want to reiterate, unless they've probably been minuted anyway, we can also take those.
I think what I'd ask Jackie to do is just to come up with a list of further information that's been asked for, either explicitly or implicitly, that can be done as a circulated informed document to the committee to inform us. Okay. But thank you very much, everybody. If we could move on therefore to agenda item 6, retiring firing commitments. Thank you, Emma, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So welcome, Tom Bennett, as meetings member, and Joe. You're a table on everything, so that's so Tom, if you'd like to give us a bit of an introduction to this one, but a short.
Yes, I'll keep it short. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee, for inviting us here today. It's good to be able to update you all on the progress that has been made regarding those 45 commitments. And I think a substantial amount of work has been done, continues to be done. We've got about 30% of them complete now, of almost all the others, except perhaps one. Substantial progress has also been made. So 30% figure just tells part of the story. It's also 20% which we've identified as sort of continuous standards that need to be met as well. But I look forward to getting your feedback on both the how it's communicated, presentation, and also the underlying work that's gone into meeting those commitments.
Okay, let's start in the middle of the work. Mary-Therese, would you like to?
No, I'm just wondering, I have a question. I don't know if it's in this paper, so I'll say it anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe I should put it earlier. I have a question about payments of legal fees. Is that in this paper here? No. Paper, my notes. So I should ask that in the financial one. Okay.
You're willing to take the question anyway?
Not potentially.
Well, no, I just don't know if the council is a suspect, which I think we are. Will money be spent on, you know, defending the council? What's the plan? And also, if there are named members, either employees or former councillors, would the council then be prepared to, or is it going to pay for that?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's an early stage as of yet. We haven't had the charging decisions from the police to the CPS, but that is something that they're going to have to think about. The previous financial paper does talk about legal challenges and legal costs, but that's mainly associated at this moment with the ongoing payment and costs associated with our recovery efforts from the other corporate companies who are involved in what happened. And that's where we're having to make provisions at the current moment, but it is a known potential area of expenditure.
Okay, so then I just have one other question. In 2028, what happens then? There seems to be sort of funding streams going towards that, and then what happens then? Do we have another discussion and decide going forward?
Yes, and thank you, Councillor. I know this was raised at the last committee in relation to the not to the inquiry commitments, but to the Grenfell support programmes. And I think we committed to updating to the committee on when they could expect a kind of time scale for a plan, including obviously the relevant consultation. And I think we have to say that we can come back in the autumn with that plan, with plenty of time to the points that have been made tonight, thinking about how we prepare for that transition. It's not there is no kind of single cliff edge in 2028. The programmes have slightly different timescales attached to them, and we will set all that out for the committee in the autumn.
Thank you. Mary.
Thank you. I just wanted to express a bit of concern about the lack of progress under the organisational leadership and workforce headings. That seems to be the outlier, actually, of where we've made less progress. And I wonder if some of it's to do with the fact that one of the pieces of work, which has several commitments in it, is to do with the culture review, which I know we're going to discuss, and it's complicated and difficult. But also Oracle appears to be playing a part, and our own grip on our own HR systems. And I suppose I was just concerned that if we can't get a grip on that, that's something that is sort of totally within our gift. So I just really want to make that observation.
Yeah, I mean, I think generally the ones under that heading tend to be a bit more complex and sort of cross work required across the organisation. Also, like the Oracle system, a number which is more affected by the cyber attack, that has certainly slowed us down. But I mean, you mentioned Oracle. That is one of my sort of number one priorities to get work on that moving immediately. I don't know if you would add anything on that, Jane.
Just that I know that HR colleagues are looking to kind of refresh the approach to sort of what I think is a rural workforce strategy, which I think they're hoping will comprehensively address. I think what there is at the moment is quite a lot of different activity going on, both in terms of training and other things across the council. But the people strategy, the workforce strategy is looking to kind of pull that together. And I know from conversations with HR colleagues that the Grenfell Tower inquiry commitments and these commitments specifically that relate to workforce will be at the heart of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. On page 217, 21, looks at taking further steps to increase the number of local residents employed by the council and more dynamic. And it makes progress made new corporate internship, 18 to 24-year-olds. On Monday, I met with the Youth Council, and I was really pleased to listen to some of those people that are very enthusiastic about coming on an internship, and had a lot to say about that. And thank you to Jackie for organising that. I was just going to ask if there's a progress report on that, because I see it's still in progress. And my other comment was on page 219, commitment 36, which is that they would ensure senior engagement with ward councillors. Now, I know that Councillor Hum and I met with a director just recently about something in our ward, which we were really pleased to receive. And I know that we had the meetings across the borough that were well received with senior memberships and ward councillors. So I just wondered if you could give us an update on the progress of those two items.
Yes, great, thank you. We can certainly provide an update on the kind of corporate internship. I think that's part of a wider effort, both to understand kind of are the number of residents we employ across different schemes, both in terms of substantive posts, but also internships. But yes, happy to come back to the committee with more information on that. That's one part of that commitment. Again, I would expect to see that reflected in the kind of workforce strategy, thinking about what we do to make employment opportunities available to local people, both within the council and across our partnership. I think you're referring to the kind of Your Council Comes to You events that took place last year. I think we are doing a review of that programme to look at kind of what worked, what didn't work so well, and what we might do differently. I think that it's got to be one of a kind of number of approaches to engaging more closely with ward councillors, including specifically ward councillors in the immediate area around the town.
Yeah, certainly my ward, we had very good feedback from those events. Other councillors had similar experiences, but certainly, yeah, that's just one route through to engaging with ward councillors, reviewing the feedback.
And can I just further ask, with the internships, this is obviously completely separate to where we've got construction going on and we're employing people through construction internships. Because we were quite surprised during our last municipal year to visit some of the construction sites in North Kensington, and I'd be pleased to see that the percentage was very high on local people being employed there on internships and local industry. So that's obviously separate from this.
Yeah, that's something that I think we look for wherever possible in terms of the social value side of contracts. So yeah, that's an additional.
Yeah, and just to answer your first question, I just checked. We've had the first 2 rounds of interns joining already. I know because we've been making sure we're getting all the laptops and getting them all set up. So they're landing well, they're going well, and I think the feedback we're getting is good.
But they're coming to speak at our full council soon, so and I know what their questions are, so they're going to be good ones.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So I really read this with interest. I hadn't seen it before in this format, and I do appreciate there's still quite a lot of work to do. I mean, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of commitments, and some of them quite hard, and some of them are really specific, and I can see how they're easy to measure and report back on. And some of them are just really tricky. So I didn't have time to digest Samuel's whole letter, but I did skim it. And I wanted to just talk about theme number 2, relationships, trust and residents' voice, and the KPIs and the outcomes. I mean, look, I guess this is a really difficult thing to measure, but I kind of took Sammy's point about marking our own homework, and I kind of worried that, a question on the survey was probably, I think we probably need to think about other ways of measuring and developing that. And I mean, there's a couple of them which are like that. Yeah, I mean, commitment 10, commitment 11, probably the same thing applies. Just can we think about other ways to really show that we're making progress?
Yeah,
it's one question on the side.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good challenge, and so I mean, part of that, I think the independent panel will be important. That's not marking our own homework is a big part of the reason for having them there. But I don't know.
Yeah, we probably should have been clear. Thank you, Councillor Tyrone. I think we probably should have been clear that absolutely. Yeah.
And the TCC.
Yes, these are examples, I think, of the kinds of indicators that we need to think about. So I totally agree that it has to be more than just that, and there are some which I think are quite difficult to measure kind of quantitatively, but nonetheless I think we can gather a sort of basket of indicators which give us some sense about whether we're making progress. I think there's a question that this committee posed us, which is, on the one hand, we want to see clearly kind of what's been done, and on the other, we want to understand what kind of impact it's having on some of those base indicators. And you're right that those questions about trust are hard to measure, although there are other sources of information which we can use and triangulate, and I think we should do that.
Just on the independent panel, I mean, that's going to be difficult. I mean, it's difficult. This is all very difficult stuff, but just really think about how it's recruited, how it reports back, how it's representative, how much trust the community have in that, all of these things, and getting these panels together was.
I think one of the things to indicate is that we're asking the independent panel to get engaged with.
That's the independent scrutiny function.
That's right. I mean, obviously, it's up to them to decide whether they want to do so or not, but we reached out.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Simon's already raised the point, but I have read Sonia's email. And yes, marking your own homework, so that's already been dealt with. On page 20, the commitment 8, we talk about building effective relationship between housing and other departments. And this, I know we do our best, but it's a recurring thing that things fall through the gaps and, left with the speak to the right. And then the residents are left to deal with it. So, and you said that an internal oversight mechanism is yet to be allocated. And can you just expand on that a bit? Page 212, commitment 8.
Do you want to talk about the commitment oversight and then on quantum data?
Yeah, so I think that is it's an area where again there are kind of individual pieces of work going on, good pieces of work between housing and other departments. I think there is much more that we can do to join that support up. And I think some of the comments in the paper about identifying vulnerabilities in households and using that information effectively is a case in point. I'm hopeful that some of the changes we will make in terms of digital and systems, which I'm sure you'll talk about later this evening, will support that, because I think sometimes what gets in the way of communication between teams is issues around data sharing, some of which obviously need to stay in place, some information we can share between departments, and sometimes systems as well, people not being able to pull the right data off the system in order to understand how they can support someone. I think we could do more too and I know we've talked a bit in the previous item about locality models. We could do more to bring services together for people, and I think that helps to see things through the prism of the resident perspective rather than through the prism of what services we deliver, and I think that's a big opportunity.
And the sharing of data and the understanding of data across the organisation is it's tough nut to crack, but it's going to be absolutely crucial to being able to deliver more with less, which is what we need to do. And that's one of the things we've already been looking at with the new AWS services coming in. How can they pull data out of different systems? A lot of systems aren't in a position currently where that can be done. So I know we're not on the technology strategy paper yet, but being able to pull that data across different departments, get sort of one view of residents, it's going to be very important. But reviewing all the sort of data security requirements as we go along will also be crucial.
Thank you. Monica.
Yes, I think I'll send some questions in around the indicators, if you'd like to talk about this one. So just two things with this meeting here. I was into page 198 around the dashboard, which I think is going to be a very, very helpful tool for understanding and seeing things. But I was quite concerned that it's still not in place 9 months since November 25. And I did wonder, because my second question is around the council culture. What are the specific reasons? And I'm missing something here, because dashboards are used in lots of organisations once and aren't quite as difficult as some of these qualitative indicators, but because it seems to be holding up things. So what were the challenges then with that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor President. I wouldn't say the dashboard itself is kind of holding up things. What I think we wanted to do in the first instance is be able to report on kind of progress and activity that happened. We'd heard from this committee that they want to see more about kind of indicators and outcomes. I think that in terms of the practicalities of setting up the dashboard, the cyber attack did get in the way a bit. But I think you're right that we could have moved kind of more quickly on that. I think the other challenge is that challenge that Councillor Siren identified, which is that some of these things really are hard to measure, and I think it's wrong to put out a crude measure which might kind of offend, upset, or make it look like we think we're making more progress than we are. So I think getting those getting those indicators right, and also explaining where we don't think they tell the whole story, and actually there isn't a really good proxy for a particular progress is going to be important. And I think it has to do that bit both around showing progress so that people can quite quickly, easily see what's been done, and also what difference it's made where we know that, and we're honest about where we don't.
And so the example you gave us is you're fairly happy to start using, because I think it's through feedback that you're going to understand how to change that dashboard. I don't think you can ever design a dashboard that everybody's happy with. So it's just because I think it is going to be a very important milestone that. Thank you. Which takes me on to the next stage. I was very interested in the independent review of council culture and that review. And again, time frame wise, I can imagine that there are some challenges referenced to development of the terms of reference. But given that it is absolutely crucial because the transitional work can't start really until that's happened, I did wonder in other organisations, sometimes so my question is, do you think we have the in-house expertise really because it's around culture, to actually get those things moving? And did you consider actually bringing in an independent reviewer to actually start helping you set those terms of reference? Because it's quite a long period of time, and the transition can't even start until it's summer it's next year, isn't it? Early 2027 you're looking at, and yet commitments and that change was committed to back in 24 or late 24. So I did just wonder if you've ever used the external reviewer to look at your culture, and anyway, we knew what the inquiry said about the culture, setting up the terms of reference. It's not always an in-house thing that is the best approach. I wondered again, what is it that's taken a couple of years on this?
I think just on sort of going forward, and I'll let you cover the past. So it will be an independent chair, and the independent panel will also be involved, and consultation, of course, with the TCC and others in setting those terms of reference. And we expect that to be done in August, and then the report will be finished by January 2027. So I think in terms of the transition to the sort of post 2028 and onwards, that will give us enough time to make sure that that's sort of fully considered and taken into account when developing that transition plan. Don't know if you want to add to that.
I think you're right, Councillor Cress. It has taken time. So we made that commitment in November 2024. In February 2025, the government announced the decision to take down the tower, which was obviously a kind of a difficult moment for the community. What we wanted to do is to go out to recruit the independent advisory panel to start to shape those terms of reference. And I think that did take a bit longer than I would have liked. So we didn't have the first meeting of that panel until October of last year. And the document, the report in front of you tonight is I would say it is quiet about their role, because they are a group of people, bereavement survivors, residents, who themselves, I think, are sceptical about being involved in this, and certainly concerned about being blamed for what we as officers might put forward to leadership team for decision. And so they have worked with us behind the scenes to shape the terms of reference that you have in front of us tonight, as well as conversations we've had with the London Fire Brigade and others with expertise in this area. So I agree it's taken too long, but I'm hopeful that we now have at least a specification which we can go out to find somebody externally to conduct this review and to complete this by early next year, which I think then will give us a clear roadmap for those future changes that we will need to make.
Thank you. Just one probe on that, on the basis that, in a sense, because we're dealing with trust, that's where I would have probably gone independent to even start the towards development and advice, because then it's totally separate from you, even as individuals who came after the 2017, but that the council is still associated with the formation of those. It just is something I was thinking for the future.
Peter.
Yes, thank you very much. So again, thinking about the independent review of council culture, I think it's absolutely right that this should have a forward-looking approach. Some changes that we still need to make and implement, and more changes to our culture. But I think actually we've heard in the room tonight that residents, some residents have a perception that culture hasn't changed between 2017 and now. So I do wonder if within the terms of reference there should be also a retrospective, between what happened between 2017 and the commitments themselves in November 2024, as well as looking at what's happened since the commitments were implemented and bringing those to the fore. We've seen that there are gaps, and the racial and social disparities are noted in the report, which is valuable, but it is also a concern. There's been a time scale of it. Sort of looking at the theme of being a better landlord, there was unfortunately a judgment from the independent regulator that RBKC was at a C3 grade last year. That again is 8 years after the Downfall Tower fire. That is the RBKC's own achievements as a landlord. That's a really kind of shocking element, and it's a whole theme of four themes of all of these commitments. I think we need to look at how the council is handling that, and again, giving that level of trust to see that these commitments are being delivered. I think if we look at pages 210 to 11, there are a couple of examples here, but they're actually throughout the commitments themselves. And they're awaiting oversight mechanisms. Now, it seems odd because they're commitments that are actually in progress. So the comment is that once the commitment is complete, an internal oversight mechanism will be allocated. It seems to me, particularly if we're concerned about timescales and delivery, that there should be an oversight mechanism put in place, regardless of the completion status of the commitment. And I think, we've had a little bit about accountability side, particularly with KPIs. We've seen that some of these commitments are rated as complete. What is the independent validation of that? And has the community itself been asked to validate that completion?
Which commitments?
Sorry, the commitments that are complete.
Just generally.
Yeah. So
building control.
Just to briefly explain that there is a mechanism for overseeing progress on all the commitments, whether or not they're complete. The important thing for us in the commitments which were judged as complete, and I think that the question about kind of community challenge about that is helpful. We've tried to keep those to ones that we feel are kind of relatively factual, is that we wanted to make sure that particularly they weren't forgotten or they didn't slip. And so in order to do that, we wanted to make sure there was a kind of internal mechanism for taking them forward, which was include reporting to some of the select committees, for example. So if we're saying something is complete, is there then a mechanism for checking that doesn't change in the future, whereas all of the incomplete ones are being constantly monitored until completion.
Just going back to your question on the culture review, I completely agree, because whilst we do predominantly want it to be forward facing, the fact that we are able to change, we're able to adapt and take on board feedback is actually part of the culture itself. So I think part of that, looking backwards and saying, how have we listened to residents, how have we adapted to that feedback within our culture, will I'm sure be part of what it looks into. And on that housing, it is certainly very unfortunate, and I would say the improvement in that sector and improving that C3 grade as quickly as possible is pretty much a number one priority now. And I know it doesn't fall within my area, but I know a huge amount of work's going into that. Do you think, Callum, want to add anything on that?
No, I think we were all disappointed as council with that C3 judgment. I think a lot of work is happening within housing management to try and ensure that we address the regulator's findings whilst building on the things that they said were good or reasonable, which there were a few. So it's important that we really invest effectively to be able to deal with the state of some of our properties, which is we had, and protecting that ability to invest and making sure that investment lands and is delivered in a good way that our residents value is a fundamental part of all of their work. And the only thing I would just maybe add on the culture question is what we're trying to balance here is to Councillor Preston's point about going fast enough. We've tried to work with people to take them along the journey, which takes longer, but it's important that we do that. But equally, what we're trying to do is not ask people to repeat themselves again about the pain that the council has caused them, whether it be the social or racial discrimination, whether it be the failing of service. We've got enough feedback there, but absolutely in the way that we're trying to design the specification is that there'll be opportunity for any residents who want, through structured conversations, to be able to talk, and they won't be limited to only talking about the future. And that will help, I hope, the independent people to be able to really hear what we've heard and what we're very passionate about this.
I just thought two things. One was just something I kind of just thought on the back of that conversation in terms of, I agree, being forward focused is definitely where we want to be, but in thinking about the past and responsibility, I just feel really conscious. I know there's limited amount we can probably discuss, but with the criminal investigation currently ongoing, obviously that's going to be a real kind of opportunity or kind of whatever the result of that's going to be a chance for the council to kind of reflect on the role that they played we played in the disaster. And so I was just kind of wondering in what way that's kind of factoring in. I appreciate with the investigation still being live, it might be limited. But the commitment that I was really kind of interested in, partly because it's quite nascent still, was commitment 34 on page 225, in terms of the data strategy. I can kind of foresee a couple of challenges to that. I'm sure that the cyber attack has limited the amount of progress that's happened so far, but I was wondering, given the cyber attack, in a move to doing things with a new and improved sort of approach to data, have officers and the lead member kind of considered the barriers to trust, both for residents and for service providers as well, and what steps might they be planning to take to I mean, part of having an effective data strategy does mean things are held digitally in some ways, and I know with a lot of frontline services, a lot of notes, a lot of the most valuable information about the conversations that you're having about need happen on paper or in your head, or you don't get time to input it into the system. So just if there is, as part of that, I would ask that there is some kind of strategy made from moving from paper to digital and encouraging people to trust that system, because it could be a huge and also a question of, one thing I think digital strategies can often and data strategies can often lack is people don't like being boiled down to raw numbers. It's often not a particularly effective way of seeing all of the nuance. So I was wondering what sorts of factors would be kind of included in that. And I think if you're doing a really kind of creative and innovative data strategy, you can also include things like social value and qualitative data in that. And so I was just wondering if that what sort of maybe more innovative approaches were considering being used, and especially given all the kind of technological progress that's been made. I think thinking about how we can incorporate slightly more complex data into that would be great if it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the second question first. So I think, it's really important, as you say, this data strategy is very nascent at the moment. That's because we've been recovering from the cyber attack, so a lot of people have been involved in that and focused on that and recovery. Also that we frankly have a lack of talent in that area. We need more sort of really talented people. So we're hiring a new CIO, Chief Information Officer, we're interviewing for this month, and we've got some other key roles we want to bring in. So we're going to bring in a lot of expertise in that area to try and make sure we get it right. There's a lot of innovative things that can be done. Companies would talk about like knowing your customer and all the different interactions you have and pulling them together in one place. And from our point of view, if we know residents complained about something in housing, they've also been in touch with the environmental team, maybe their children's involved with family and children's services. There's a lot of value for our residents that can be pulled together from that. At the same time, where are the checks, where are the permissions that actually that data can be shared? Someone in housing can see, is it appropriate for them to see a report on that person's child, etc. So getting it right is incredibly important, because once you've broken that trust, as you say, it's really hard to get it back. So that's why, there's some of the reasons why it's nation, some reasons why I think it's really going to be a really important part of what this department does, and it's going to be quite crucial to how we deliver services in the future. I don't know if
we can perhaps go on to it in the next paper as well, but some of the capability we're trying to bring in that will enhance our ability to engage with residents, whether on the phone or whatever else, will hopefully deal with that point around paper and what's in our officers' heads, making sure that sort of typing up notes isn't an afterthought, but it's actually we're benefiting from new technologies in the appropriate ways. But part of the reality of what we've learned post the cyber attack is we have too much of a fragmented system of our services, which this recommendation is talking to. So we collect lots of information in individual silos about our residents that we're supporting, but when we actually look to the cumulative value that has, at the moment, residents having to repeat themselves many times over, things aren't being passed effectively between services, which leads to delays. So the having a data strategy is central to being able to resolve so many of those issues, but it will take some time to get there. And just to your first point about the charging decision, I think it speaks a lot to all of these commitments, really, because in the one hand, we are the council that the inquiry found about today, and we are the council that was at the time of 2017. And the charging points will be charged for what happened in 2017 and before, but it will be this council who is charged now. And so as an organisation, we spend quite a lot of time thinking about how we can make sure we both reflect on who we are now, informed by those realities, and the reality of who we were at that time. And I think a lot of this work is all about trying to both show progress where there has been progress effectively, but also continue to create that space so people can share their reflections about how we were. Partly because I think for some people, it will be very difficult to be able to reflect on change and accept change until some of these broader questions of justice have come through. So it's incumbent upon us to hold both of those two realities at any one time. And absolutely, when those charging points come through, that'll be another really difficult moment, both for us to hold that space, but for residents to be able to feel comfortable with any progress that they have or haven't seen.
Thank you very much. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. I'll try and be as quick as I can. The first one on commitment 10 on page 215. This is about decisions made since the tragedy, and acknowledging the harm that's been done, which is significant. And as I know, the partnerships team have been dealing with the legacy of that in all of its work ever since. I'm not completely sure that the outcome is one question on a resident survey. I think there needs to be something a lot more than that if you're going to say that you've delivered that commitment. I think that's just not even lip service. It doesn't even touch the sides of what actually people have been through as a result of the decisions made by this council since 2017. So I would like to see that one really beefed up quite considerably. And the main point I was going to make was around relationships, trust and resident voice. In conjunction with commitment 35 on page 219. As you all know, this council is made up of elected members who are elected to represent the constituents of their ward within this council. That is one quite significant element of resident voice. What I've heard at this meeting so far on the previous items, but I've heard it again on this item, oh, we will consult with the citizens panel, the youth council, the TCC, the RAs, all of which you should, but nobody has said we will consult with the ward councillors. And on commitment 35, and I didn't mean 35, it's the one about having a more senior officer engagement with
36.
Thank you, 36, my mistake. On that one, it's really great to hear that some majority councillors have benefited from this. I know it has been across the borough. But Joe, you mentioned that actually it's one approach to engaging more with ward councillors, especially in the area around the tower. So I'm not seeing anything here particularly about especially in the area around the tower. And I'm certainly not seeing anything like the type of improvement that we need to see in terms of the engagement and consultation with elected ward councillors, particularly for Nottingdale, but across North Kensington. And if I can quote Councillor Blakeman, it should not be after 9 years that I should be quoting this, but Councillor Blakeman said in 2018, we still are living in fear of what you will do to us next. And that aspect of the culture has not changed. So when we're talking about the review of culture, we need to be understanding, as Tayshan said before she left, it's some organisations, some parts of the borough, particularly the north, some residents that tend to not be consulted, that tend to be always on the receiving end of negative outcomes from council decisions. It always tends to be going in one direction. And I don't think you're going to be able to say that you have delivered really these commitments if you aren't going to have a plan for delivering that. You know, some of these one question in a resident survey. And when we say, by the way, that the council, the residents panel of the council has got 1,000 members and it's balanced for demographics, that doesn't necessarily apply to who responds to a particular survey. So as Monica has said, it might be just somebody who finds it easy to come to the town hall. There's no balance in that whatsoever, and it shouldn't be used as a proxy. And it just beggars my belief in terms of a council that wants to be more efficient. You have 3 ward councillors for Nottingdale, you have 13 ward councillors for North Kensington, whose job it is to represent the residents. And it's not being utilised and it's not being used. And if that is because of culture, then that needs to be seriously looked at. But when we're saying that we're going to ensure additional senior officer engagement with ward councillors, I can tell you from Nottingdale, actually, that's certainly nothing like that has even begun to happen, with the exception, by the way, of one officer sitting at that table. Thank you very much, you know who you are. But otherwise, I'm finding out things at the last minute of things that have been decided about my ward behind my back. And I cannot do the job of representing residents if I do not know. So this is actually a really, really major one. And I'm surprised that we're just going to have one question on the resident survey, question 7. What do you think RBKC acts on the concerns of local residents? That doesn't address ensuring senior officer engagement with ward councillors. So I think there's a problem here with how some of this has been characterised and put together. And I'd like to see it be reviewed. Thank you. Sorry to take up so much time.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Simmons. I'm sorry, I'll just quickly repeat the same apology, which is I think that's an example of what might measure it, but it is not the whole story, absolutely.
No.
And
what councillors' input in previous reports to this committee have been erased. So I'm quite unhappy.
So can we?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that that's been noted.
I think on commitment 10, I mean the sort of main one of the main outputs there is a very thorough lessons learned review, which you know all councillors, particularly the relevant ward councillors, will certainly be involved, and I expect that to be a very robust, thorough, detailed document. So it's certainly not just about a single question on a survey. And then in terms of engagement with ward councillors, I mean there's one example, the public meetings that attended by senior officers, which I believe has been offered across the borough. It's not just something for majority party councillors. Absolutely not. You know, it's absolutely for every part of the borough. And you know, ward councillors need to be consulted on small things as well as large things. I mean, even things like you know, parking changes go out to the ward council.
Voluntary services.
Yeah,
all of this.
of course, and you know, this is one forum where that happens. There's a number of other forums, but I think ward councillor input is absolutely vital to.
Well, I think so. Thank you, but it doesn't seem to be treated that way. So as long as that's been noted.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, our sort of my view on it as lead member, and I think our speak for Joe and Callum, but I know their view because we've discussed it. Is very much that ward councillors need to be completely involved when it comes to decisions on Grenfell recovery and Nottingdale councils in particular.
Thank you. I mean, if I could just come back on one very, very briefly, one example, the review of culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's been drafted and put together without my knowledge or input, and I found out about it like a week ago.
So
that's not an example of being involved or not being involved.
Well,
So I think I've made my point, but
we've got a draft here, and you're at the scrutiny committee, and we're discussing it.
no, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Lady with the black top.
Me.
Sorry.
Oh, hello, hi. I better stand up for this because I've got a terrible back and I speak better when I walk and talk.
Okay.
So I am obviously, I've supported the letter that was sent to this committee on the 21st of June. I think that RBKC has to think about what are the lessons that have been learned, because I don't see them, to be honest. In terms of the independent review, it isn't good enough, I'm afraid, Miss Councillor Bennett, to say, oh, well, you're not here. But we weren't there to begin with, to be able to form that strategy together with leadership.
Maybe,
and that is important.
Maybe can I
this isn't a speech,
this
is just a fact.
Can I just say procedurally, the witness that you're giving should be addressed to the members of the committee. Not to the officers.
So sorry. Okay, so now that I'm in the right place, and it draws me back to, okay, people forget RBK, that Grenfell was a display of the consequences of not engaging your residents effectively. But actually, the experience of Grenfell is felt across the borough, and it has not changed. It hasn't changed. And I think about how you have, how people here, officers, have expressed, I think, in my view, using language that implies judgment of whether something is a fact or it isn't. So that means that whatever the resident says will be looked, scrutinized, and basically judged whether it's valid or not. But what with the lessons that should have been learned is that actually your role isn't there to be judge and sentencer. Your roles are there for the sole purpose of giving us service. And therefore, it's essential that you listen to what we say. The big question in regards to, and why I'm so passionate about this, is because I have tried to work to do co-design and co-production with RBKC for a number of years. And it's been a failure after failure after failure, for precisely the same reason that this strategy or proposed way of carrying out the independent review will be a failure, because we have not been included at the beginning so that everything is led. It's not up to you to decide what looks good and what should be in it. It's up to us, because ultimately we're the ones that have to be living here. We are the ones that know and experience the culture. And what you are doing by conducting this in the way that it's being conducted is further traumatizing, further moving moving in the same way. You're not showing any learning. And something that I can demonstrate with is recently at the TCT, we requested that the director of housing management should maintain the ties to local RAs that are visiting different places. We should be invited to accompany them. But what do we find on the page, on the LinkedIn page? There's a group of officers have gone to the World's End Estate, have visited, and we are none the wiser. Why? Why? That shouldn't be happening. If there has been a culture change, and actually that should have been done right at the beginning of when you made the commitment, not now as an add-on, because actually that is the basis on which the Grenfell disaster came about. So the lessons learned would be for us to come in and inform you and work in collaboration with officers so that we create a level playing field. Because even at co-design, and thank you for taking up my recommendation of co-design, but actually I didn't realize I gave you a get out clause because it's not even glorified, it's glorified consultation. So what we want and what we would like to do is to come along with you and start that process all over again, because otherwise you're just going to continue to do what you've always done, which is no learning.
I'll just start on the culture review, and then might hand over to Callum on the point with World's End Estate.
Well, we've had like several co-design projects that have failed.
Okay. Well, I think rather than answering each question in turn, we take Sammy's.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask you, Mr. Chair. I've got a message from Rose, who's the chair of Camden Houses Residents Associations, who is watching online, and she's asking me if I can read something on her behalf. Is that okay?
If you can make it short, please.
Yeah. So she said, I think and I hope this cultural review done correctly could be a fantastic way to build better relations between residents and RBKC and improve trust, but also done incorrectly, it will really seriously erode trust. Well, I just want this to be in the minutes, just to make, so put in mind is page 212, and I'm pleased that the equality impact assessment includes housing tenants. We don't have time to debate enough, but I think we need to go further than that. And I think what some of the councillors in the north are describing is what we call under the Equality Act, discrimination by association. And I think what Grenfell has shown us is the perception of someone living in social housing, especially in the homes that you manage, tenant or leaseholders, is viewed a certain way. So I'd love the opportunity for more work to be done around this, because you can look at the number of people in your citizens panel who lives in your homes. You can look, for example, organizations in the voluntary sector run by your residents compared to other charities not here, and the kind of treatment. So I think you can go further than just generic questions. So I'd welcome for a bit more work on that. That's all. Thank you.
Emma, have you got a question to
ask? No, I haven't. Thank you.
Okay, right. So, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Well, oh, sorry.
Thank you, Joe Hamilton, resident. You've referred earlier, I think, if I heard you correctly, to not repeating survey questions effectively to people, and I can understand why that might be. However, I do feel it's very important that people are approached and know why this time they've been approached. I've had numerous calls asking for information from mobile phone numbers that I don't recognise, not anticipated, but I do think that people do need to be approached with questions, with feedback, on the understanding that this particular culture review has come about through this commitment. Thank you.
So, if you'd like to take those together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the point I've made, I'll hand over to Maxine or Joe, Callum, is on the culture review. I mean, it is absolutely, as your friend said, crucial that we get it right. And the whole specification has absolutely not been designed in a black box by myself or by officers. It's completely in response to feedback from residents and what they and you want to see. And this is the specification. The terms of reference have not been written yet. This scrutiny committee is one opportunity to get feedback. There will be other opportunities to get feedback. So I'm confident that when it's finalised, it will be a process and a set of terms of reference that people will have confidence in and will feel is very much meaningful.
And just to add to that, so I just wanted to say we worked with the independent advisory panel to shape this specification, but I think what I'm hearing really clearly tonight is that you don't feel any kind of ownership over this, and that's understandable.
No, neither do I.
Yeah,
So some of the recommendation coming from quite a number of members of the TCC and the commitment we had from yesterday. I think it's work in progress. It's not going to be resolved, but if you can make the commitment that we share that ambition together, and that you are going to work with the TCC members who are willing, capable to create the right design, and so we can have it co-produced.
Sorry, can I say that I come back again to the fact this is not a conversation between officers and residents. This is a scrutiny committee meeting, and please could you come through address our membership at the point, and we make the questions and we get an answer from officers. Now, Maxine, I think you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, I just wanted to because this is about the whole organisation, and I wanted to be here to be accountable for that, and just to respond to some of your points. But I just wanted to take us back a step. So I think when you've got a big report and a committee with a lot of agenda items, it can be easy to kind of get lost into which review we're talking about. So just to step back for a moment, immediately after the Grenfell Tower inquiry was published in September 2024, the council had a series of meetings. Many people present came along to them, and at that meeting, what we heard loud and clear was that there were people who felt that the culture of the council needed to change further, hadn't changed enough. Some people felt like it hadn't changed at all. And so in those meetings, we committed to doing an independent review of culture. And now it has taken some time, and we've heard some of the reasons why, but that's what we're talking about now. And then it has to be independent. So it's not going to be council officers doing it and not going, it has to be independent. What you've got here is the first stab at a draft terms of reference that will that then we invite people to bid for the work, people with the relevant experience to bid for the work, and that's and that as part of that we have as much involvement as possible from residents associations, TCC members, bereaved and survivors, and people who want to be part of it, and councillors and councillors.
We have to be reminded all the time. I think Maxine is making a commitment that this is
so I'm making
going to happen.
Yes, so I'm making a commitment that we've spoken. Sorry, Chair. We've spoken to the advisory panel. We've worked with them. As Joe says, we need to do more because there is no point of doing this work if it doesn't have credibility. And so it's really important that we take that time to do that and to get it right. So it's just that commitment. And I want to just make one further point, if I might, Chair, which is that we've also heard from some of the TCC members about commitments and requiring us to be committed to co-design around decisions around housing management, which we are co-production, co-design.
It's a different thing.
It is. I agree.
Because RBKC have been using co-design to circumvent it.
Excuse me.
And so there's no.
Please don't, Mimi.
I'm really sorry, but it needs to be corrected.
Mimi, you've made a very strong case which has been heard and edited. We've heard now what Maxine has said, and I think that the committee and its minutes will reflect the fact that basically there's still a lot of work to be done in this area, to put it over simply. A lot of work to be done, and there's been a commitment to lead members and from officers to hear that and to address that. And we will on future occasions hold them to account for progress that's been made. And I think repeating things is not actually going to take us any further tonight. But we do have quite a lot of work still to on this our committee tonight. So I would really like to move on to the next paper if we may, please, because we're running very late and
Can I put a tiny comment?
we have one small comment, keep it brief.
I just want to say, Chair, that there's been a lot of comment at the last council meeting about the budget and the support for the budget and so on. And if that was based on the residents panel and responses from the residents panel, by chance I was looking at the statement of accounts 24-25, and it had a breakdown of the ward responses. And the responses from the 5 northern wards was 8% of the total. 92% of the people saying yes, all these budget things are absolutely fine, came from the other wards. And I really think we noticed that. So I don't know how many of other points have been based on that, but it's actually very important to note that.
Perhaps if we can note your question and ask officers to address that outside the meeting and give us some further information. So thank you very much on this particular item. We can move on to item 7, recovery from cyber attack, and it'll be the IFCT. Joe, thank you. Joe, as you're leaving, thank you for your contribution. So on the cyber recovery strategy, we just go straight to questions on that. And perhaps, Monica, would you like to start?
No, thank you. Just 2 comments which do need to state a question. Thank you. On page 255.4, it talks about the revenue and benefits system and how obviously that's quite an old platform. So I'm told that Westminster and Hammersmith and Fulham recovered a little quicker than Kensington because their benefits and council tax data and payments were contracted out to a company. So it was a separate, they still have problems, but there was a separate security firewall and service. And then in your document, you move on and mention the true implications of holding legacy technology in comparison to modern SaaS. And obviously that's what you want to be moving to. And it's probably, I think it's worth my being a lay person asking this because that's exactly who uses these things. So when you get to the proposed decision on page 254, 12.2 notes the need to centralise IT delivery with more robust and secure governance. So my question is, and I know you talked about it being fractured, and I know that in a robust, centralised system, you can probably have different servers. I only go that far, but I would ask, talking about learning, did you look to, I'm a person that loves in-house stuff because I believe it's cheaper, but in this case, did you look at the Westminster and Hammersmith model of contracting it out to, because councils are particularly vulnerable once they've been attacked, they're liable to, there's a lot of data you can get from councils. I wondered if you had looked at contracting out those particular areas which are so sensitive.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and I think that and there's a number of different areas where that is a very valid consideration. Our current sort of focus is completing the recovery, getting them through the backlogs. We're also looking when contracts are coming up and when software, in this case software contracts, are due for renewal. And so with the revenues and benefits system, which is Civic, I believe that's due for renewal in September 2027. So we're already looking now at what could a different system look like? What do we want from it? And I think one of the considerations, as you say, has to be should we be outsourcing?
Right, so you're setting up a centralised, robust system, and
Yes.
then you'll do it in stages. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a point, so 12.2 about the centralisation of capability is different to individual business line systems that different service areas would utilise. So what we've got is IT capabilities spread across the business, which has contributed to why we've ended up with a fragmented system that needs to be centralised. That absolutely different services, some of whom use business lines system that are inside of our estate that have taken longer to recover. Others use business lines system that are SaaS outsourced. And if you look at the areas where we recovered fastest, just like in Westminster and Smith and Fulham, they tended to be those SaaS systems. So centralised capability, so we can ensure we strengthen and improve our organisational security and make better decisions. But each business line system will be looked at individually.
Thank you very much.
Yes, hello. So in terms of the ways that we work with House of Parliament and Westminster City Councils, the attack has led to digital fragmentation of that. So anything that's done on a kind of bi-borough or tri-borough basis. To what extent are we reintegrating those services, and is that built into the kind of future? That would be one thing to be aware of. And then we've seen the direct costs of approximately 1.2 million. Do we have a forward projection on the kind of total costs of the cyber attack? Things must have fees originally to it. And what recovery is available, insurance or otherwise on that. And then just finally, what have we done with the ICO in terms of understanding what penalties might be levied by them against us? I appreciate the report says we want to do some notification once, but we're a long way past 72 hours notifying residents of their data breach. So what is the procedure for notifying people of the exact risks that they might face on the basis of the data that might have been linked?
Yeah. So I'll take those in order. And just chip in wherever. So on tri-borough, I mean, one of the sort of outcomes of the review post cyber was, I think, across all three boroughs, that we needed greater data sovereignty. So we need our own instance of Microsoft, for example, and so that is very much the direction we're moving on. So we'll make our own decisions on our own IT. Of course, there still will be a number of services that work by borough, and so therefore we'll have to work closely with particularly Westminster. There's not so much tri-borough with Smith and Fulham, but particularly Westminster, to make sure whether it's permanent children's services, adult social care, libraries, things like this. I think libraries probably will remain on one system, but that the data can be integrated, that you don't make a care worker's life hell because they're working with two completely different systems that work completely different ways. So I think it's about working closely with them whilst having data sovereignty. On the cost, so yeah, 1.2 million scope so far. We don't currently have a figure as to sort of final cost. I think I would say there's two things which are sort of slightly larger in terms of the cost of the council. The first one is going to be sort of delivering our plan to deliver sort of future proper cyber security, simplification of systems. And that will be a capital investment that we're scoping at the moment. In terms of ongoing costs, well, we will be commissioning, in some cases, new systems. There will be some revenue costs, but that should be that should A, allow us to switch a number of systems off, so be savings, and B, it's about digital transformation, which should make cost savings across the council. As you know, many companies are going through digital transformations and reducing costs. So will councils, and in our case, with our sort of financial requirements to reduce costs, digital transformation is a major part of the transformation program. So while there will be some new costs, I hope it should be very much beneficial financially for us. On the ICO, so the ICO was notified within 72 hours. So that was the requirement there. Have been working very closely with them throughout. I believe it is pretty unprecedented for councils to receive fines, because they would see that would then hamper our ability to actually implement the changes. It's sort of so we can't rule it out at this point, but I think we're hopeful that sort of demonstrating the changes in our plans will be much more what they're looking at there. I think, notifying residents. Yes, it's really important we get it right, because you don't want to get one email today, another email in 2 weeks. Oh, and by the way, also this. It is a very laborious process. So some of it can be done by machines, effectively by software to scan through, see what's the relevant data, what is relevant and what's sensitive. And we've gone through a lot of that, and we've got the document stacked down from here to about here. And that's the point where it becomes more manual. And we'll be bringing in outside expertise to go through that, make sure we identify the cases, and then contacting residents whose data has been compromised, starting with the most vulnerable cases first. Some cases that will actually require a phone call or even a face-to-face meeting. In most cases, it will just be an email, but with the ability to contact the council. Alex.
Yeah, just a quick question from me. I didn't know, forgive me if I missed something, but I didn't notice anything in the strategy that was around kind of digital access. Obviously, digital tools work best the more people that are kind of using them, but there'll always be some residents that, kind of as you alluded to, can't use systems for whatever reason, and also even members of the workforce that might face challenges. So I wondered if there was anything, if there could be any specification about what plans there are to accommodate those people. And also in some cases, people might just need to be onboarded. It might not be that they can't do it, just that, you know, if there are any plans for kind of digital outreach in the community, but also obviously the workforce, you'll appreciate the cybersecurity training. But other parts of the workforce, thinking frontline services as well.
Yes, digital, it is very important, digital access. As we go, so there's a couple of things. Is firstly for all residents, you know, most people are quite digitally active in one way or another. Making it a lot simpler for them to contact the councils and talk about single front door. Don't have to go up looking up different phone numbers or different, you know, it's an email address here, but it's a form over there. So a single front door, and so the first thing we've done on that transformation is bring in AWS call centres that are very well established in the corporate world. It's a bit more nation in local government world, but there are some councils, a handful of councils who have gone down that route, and that actually in many ways increases access, because firstly it's 24/7. So, you know, people who, you know, are at work during the day, can't call until late at night, they can often, in most cases, get their questions answered. It's also automatically multi-language, so for no extra cost to the council, they can speak almost whatever language they like, and AWS picks, the system will pick that up and give them a response in their language. In terms of people who struggled with digital integration, those are with digital tools and digital access, there still will always be a way to contact a human being. And even on the AWS tool, if you're calling up, it tells if you're getting frustrated, or if you called, you know, it might be your second time calling, and we'll prioritize you to reach through to a human being. But also we'll still have a number of centres open, and we're actually looking to move away from just having that in the town hall to have sort of a northern hub, a central hub, and a south hub for people to be able to come and meet people in person. Then there's other things we're doing around engagement of digital tools. I can't remember what it was. One for the people with
Tom, we're going to have a further update on this in the future. So, you know, I think if you just do the headlines.
Sorry, that's probably the headlines.
Okay, so Tom, yeah, you say you're going to employ some new people with particular expertise, so that's really good. But I completed finally my cyber training last night, and actually I found it rather difficult. And it took me quite a long time. And so I just wonder, at the end of the day, we're only as good as the people. So have we all had enough training? Is getting that certificate enough? And the other thing is, I mean, when I first started on the council, we all used our own computers. Now I have a council computer, which I use exclusively for council work. Are those computers, it strikes me as being quite old. Are they up to date? Do they have up to date security? You know, how is the kit good enough? And are the people using it well enough trained to make us safe? Because it struck me doing that long thing yesterday that actually it would just be one slip and someone could get back in again.
Yeah.
A cyber ransom person or whatever.
So on the people, so we will never be at 100% safe. That is the reality. And even, you know, organisations like the CIA, where people's training will be at a very high level, they can still get hacked and have been hacked. And you know, companies that can spend hundreds of millions in cybersecurity will have still been hacked. So we can never be completely safe, but this will make us significantly safer. And when we look back to our cyber attack, you know, there are things that we could have done to significantly improve our chances. And it's not, even though the entry point is normally to some extent via a human being, but some chink in the armour, there's lots of things we can do, like monitor outbound data. So someone might get in, but then what they really want is to take stuff out. So monitoring that much more closely is a big part of the strategy, and that's something we've already made improvements in. In terms of the kit,
In fact, I'll expand a little bit. So we know that 60% loss of cyber attacks are as a result of somebody clicking something or giving access to information that they should. There's social engineering and other mechanisms that are used there. So the people aspect of this is really, really important. We are doing a review currently of the cyber training. And I say that because I've sat with members around this table delivering the cyber training, and it's a little bit long in places, it's a little bit less accessible in places. And we know we can do things in a more considered way in bite-sized chunks over time to help people have that continual reinforcement. So that's a work in progress. That will form part of our cyber resilience programme. It's recommended in the strategy alongside the technical controls that we have in place, but we need to strengthen. In terms of the kits, it's one of the things that was already in place ahead of the cyber attack, but it's been strengthened since. So we have something called endpoint detection in place. So alongside the controls we have around who can access what within our software and detection mechanisms that Councillor Bennett's just described. On the kit itself, we have security mechanisms, and that includes the ability to wipe the kit if we lose it anywhere, if we leave it on the train, etc. So there's lots of different layers of security. But now we've put them in place, or some of those things were in place previously. We just need to make part of our BAU going forward.
I think in the past, people.
Can we please keep it succinct?
Okay. Just in people use their own computers, so all different councils were using all different computers and doing their own work on them. But also I noticed, I don't do that, but a lot of councillors have got it on their phone. So that again, you're doing other stuff on your phone. So that again is a risk.
Right, can we take all four remaining councillors? Pose a single question and we're going to get a complete answer.
I've just got some suggestions for the strategy. So I wanted to work on it because it's more than an IT strategy, and that is what we need. It includes data. And I thought the cyber training was great. I thought it was really good. It's the best I've done. I've put all organisations that I'm involved in. I wondered if the strategy should address some key things like explaining why this is different, what we're doing differently. So maybe in an introduction, something about software as a service, rationalisation, adopt not adapt, and responsibility on users. All of those things are quite key, and maybe it could be drawn out. I wondered about, I'd love to see us embedding customer feedback. By customers, I mean the users, the people who work for us, who use this as a tool. do they, if they get frustrated by their IT, is there a proper mechanism of business, I don't know, partners or whatever, taking that information, feeding it back so they get continuous improvement? Data, it doesn't mention, it talks about data as a critical foundation priority. It doesn't talk about its role in scrutiny. Actually, if we've got better data and better presentation of data, we can scrutinise stuff better. And I think that's a key role for it to play. And finally, there don't seem to be any councillors in your governance arrangements. And actually, maybe we could do with some councillors and some courtees, who are experts from outside as part of our governance. And maybe some mention of some reporting, either to the audit committee, to the leadership committee, in some way, shape or form that we can embed to get that cycle of continuous improvement. And that's
it. Sorry. I can be very brief. First of all, I was one of those early midnight owl, but a few of us, we were told not to put dinner last night. But yeah, I thought it was very good actually. I was a bit splitting feathers, but it was good. So we must have been the most unlucky council to get a double whammy at the end of last year with the fair funding bill hitting us and a cyber attack at the same time. So the only comment I would make for this is, and Councillor Press will be pleased to see this, is I was very happy to see the glossary at the end of the book.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been sitting here for a long time. I've had a couple of comments on it as well. I thought it was really good, really welcome, all of it. I also was a bit unclear about some of the kind of key changes. So I think a lot of good words, and you can't disagree with any of it, but just really understanding what the changes are. I understand that it's going to be a unified system, like one-stop shop. But maybe next time, just be clearer about the changes we're going to get. I also wanted to ask about the ICT team, and I wasn't sure whether that was an internal team. Is it people working here, or is it external consultants? Who are they? I mean, the ones being recruited. How many of them are there? Just any more information about that.
Right, I have, Councillor Marsh has already touched on the cost. I would love to know if you're any closer to establishing what the cost of the recovery is going to be. It's great. The cyber attack has been, I guess, a bit of a catalyst for us to get our act together. Bad timing, but it's always bad timing, isn't it? And do we have cost of, how much it's going to cost us? And how will you be funding it? Has that all been taken into account? And Councillor Weir has already made the point about including, to make it user friendly, all staff and councillors. Yeah, that's because I think cost is key here. And without that, we can't approve it.
Key question, cost. Quick answer.
Yeah. So just to come back on, I'll try and cover them all. Mary, on your suggestions, really helpful. Absolutely, data should be will be, I think, really crucial to scrutiny. It'll help improve decision making across the board, and therefore will really help in scrutiny. And getting councillors with experience in this area and co-optees on the governance side of things, I think it's a very good idea. Just being clear about explaining what we're doing, which I think also comes to your point. And this is a fairly high level document, and I think underneath that we need, in as much as possible in layman's terms, to really explain what the change would be, what we're doing, why we're doing it, what it's going to achieve. So we'll absolutely do that. The ICT team. So we have had to bring in external expertise to sort of plug a gap, particularly as we go through this recovery. But that should in the future very much be an internal team because it is sort of core to the functioning of the council with the right expertise on it. And a very important first step is hiring the right CIO, which is the process we're going through at the moment. And then making sure that the right team is built around him or her. And then costs. But yeah, that's still So there's two things. There's the direct costs to the recovery, which will include bringing in sort of third parties to help work through the backlogs, for example, backlogs in planning, revenues and benefits. So there's that cost, which we don't know entirely what it is yet because we haven't got through all the backlogs. And then there's the building for the future costs, which is slightly different because, as I say, in a sense, that's also tied in with the investor save. It's quite difficult to pull apart what's the cost from strengthening our systems to prevent against cyber attacks versus simplifying our systems to improve processes, because often that'll be part of the same decision. But I think it is important we bring you sort of clear plans on that as soon as we've got them.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we're hoping to bring you something in September and October, which will be a detailed implementation plan. With as much as we can do. There's a lot of work that sits within this strategy. On the one hand, it's great to be in a position where 94, I think now 96% of our services have been recovered, but they've been recovered to the point that they were before the attack. And I think where we've got to really reflect is we're overarchingly still at the beginning of this journey of improvement. There are bits of legacy technology that some of the councillors have highlighted, and then benefits and reps. There's a significantly outdated technology that needs reinvestment.
So look forward to your further reporting.
Yeah, I will make sure that's good. I think while we can't give you a figure now, I wouldn't, and while in many ways this is a good moment, there's a lot to still do. So when we come back, if the figure's higher than you might have hoped, we'll do our best for prioritisation, but we're still looking at the space.
Thank you very much indeed. If I could say thank you for this session on this subject, and obviously I think beginning of the journey is probably the most significant saying. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
For that. If we can move on to the next item on the agenda, it's the forward plan. There are quite a few items on here. If we've only got a small number, I'm not asking everybody to pick their favourite. I will, if necessary, do a page turn. But if we've only got 2 or 3 to raise, the quickest way would be to ask collectively if you've got any particular one that you wish to raise. If you spot one on another occasion after this meeting, the door is not closed. You just need to indicate to Jackie that you have it. And we'll put a very packed program this year, but we will try to pick up on priorities. Sometimes they can be answered by an information brief officer rather than a technical meeting. So, and also new ones will occur during the year, and we will revisit this list at every meeting. So it's not once and for all. So are there any particular priorities, or does everyone be happy that the tracker is up to date as it is?
I think we noted some of our priorities at the last meeting, didn't we?
We did.
So they're still
We
in
did.
process.
We did that very much so.
We asked, Tony and I asked for information, and we got some of it, but not all of it, but we have not forgotten.
And the door is always open to feeding into Jackie. If procedurally she has to say it's got to come to that meeting to make an official committee thing or something like that, governance wise, then she'll advise you on that. So thank you very much for that. On the scrutiny work programme, every select committee had at least one, if not 2 occasions on which to discuss those programmes. They came forward with their individual programmes, and Jackie then, and thank you to Jackie for a big piece of work in drawing them together. The detailed implementation is backed with the committees that they refer to in the chart. So I'm not talking about detail here. Personally, I'm happy that Jackie's done a composition that reflects the different committees' works. And it's now up to the individual committees to implement their own work programme during the year. I don't think we've identified any big clashes. We're supposed to look for clashes and for gaps. A classic one, which I've always thought about in previous chairing previous committees, is the relationship on transition when a child becomes an adult at 18 or if they're CN different age. that word transition, now it's in or not at such care this time. And all, you know, it's that kind of place where it's got to be on the list somewhere, but also it's important that Mary's committee and Anne's committee actually make sure that they're looking at the same things, the same sort of from both sides of the fence, so to speak. Other ones are very much more siloed in their content. So with that, are you happy that we've passed that and accept that work program?
Agreed.
Now, there are a couple of details here. First of all, budget working group, terms of reference, and more, perhaps more importantly, the appointment of my dear chair as the chair of the budget working group. We don't formally agree this.
Agreed.
No. The composition of the budget working group by default is the chairs of the select committees plus a representation from the other parties. And that is really a question for Jackie to work out in detail directly with. Now,
Well, it's for the committee to agree.
well, we have to agree on that shit.
We have to, yeah,
but the
because we
point,
don't meet.
yeah, but the point I'm making is, we don't want to go through. But do you, first of all, are the chairs accepting they're going to be members?
Agreed. Yes.
Okay, right. Then we need to make sure that there's proper representation from your.
We have a nominee.
You do.
And it would be Peter.
Okay, right.
You need to ask Linda.
Do I need to ask Peter?
Yeah, but I think, okay, so,
If, depending on the notice.
Yeah.
I can make a
Be a problem for me as well.
And yeah, sure, for you as well.
I can't do it, but that's a detail we don't need to discuss.
no, we don't,
now.
that's where I was going to say that that's a conversation with Jackie.
Okay.
So, subject to Linda agreeing who is her nominee or their nominee, we're agreed as to who the membership is. Thank you. What do you do?
We need to agree the refreshed terms of reference,
Right.
paragraph 4.3 on page 14.
Do we agree those?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, we're twinkling right now.
No, and you must be. Right, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. My son's on his blend tomorrow. Since he spends most of the day.
I hope you enjoy your last time with family.
Hey, well done, Will.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
A lot.
That's very kind. Monica, do I get 5 out of 10?
Oh, I can give you